Valerie Camden, a 41-year-old woman from Knoxville, Tennessee, was well known in her community. She owned a successful pool supply store, Valerie's Pools, which many locals trusted for their pool needs. Valerie was known for her bright and cheerful personality. She always had a smile on her face and was dedicated to helping her customers. Valerie had a strong educational background, having graduated from the University of Tennessee with a degree in business administration. She applied her knowledge and skills to make her store a beloved local business. Valerie's personal life was challenging but inspiring. In her early 20s, she went through a difficult divorce and became a single mother to her triplets, Ethan, Nathan, and Alan, all of whom are deaf. Despite the financial strain, Valerie worked tirelessly to provide for her children. She faced a significant debt to provide for them, but she never let it dampen her spirit. Valerie was a loving mother who supported her children in every way possible. She was actively involved in the deaf community, advocating for better resources and opportunities for children with disabilities. In the days leading up to her death in November 2018, Valerie was excited about the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. She planned to host a big family dinner and had already started preparing. Valerie was also working on expanding her business, hoping to open a second store in the next town over. She dreamed of providing better financial stability for her family and giving back to the community that supported her. Valerie had a close-knit group of friends and was known to frequent local spots like Starbucks and the local Waller. Her friends described her as kind-hearted and always ready to lend a helping hand. She was involved in various community activities, including volunteering at the local food bank and participating in charity events. Valerie's dedication extended beyond her family and business. She was a passionate advocate for other single mothers, especially those raising children with disabilities. She often spoke at local events and used her story to inspire others. Valerie's dreams were big, and her heart was even bigger. She hoped to create a foundation to support single mothers and provide scholarships for children with disabilities. Valerie Camden was a remarkable woman whose life, though filled with challenges, was a testament to strength, love, and determination. However, her brutal murder would erase all those achievements in the mind of Knoxville for years to come. On the morning of November 22, 2018, Thanksgiving Day, Knoxville was unusually cold and overcast. At around 8:30 a.m., Ethan Camden, one of Valerie's 19-year-old deaf triplets, made a horrifying discovery. Ethan, who had just woken up, went to check on his mom. He found Valerie's lifeless body in the master bathroom of their home. She was naked and strangled with a rope in the shower. Ethan was in shock. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. His hands trembled, and he felt frozen in place. After a few moments, he snapped out of his daze and ran to get his brothers, Nathan and Alan. The three of them stood there, stunned and scared, not knowing what to do. Nathan, who had more hearing and had better speaking skills than the other triplets, grabbed the phone and called 911. His voice was shaky as he tried to explain the situation. "My mom. She's in the bathroom. She's not moving," he cried, his voice almost unintelligible. The 911 operator tried to calm him down and give more details. Within minutes, the police and emergency responders were on their way. When the first responders arrived, they were met with a heart-wrenching scene. The triplets were huddled together, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. Officer Jane Miller was the first to enter the bathroom. She had been with the Knoxville Police Department for over 15 years and thought she had seen it all. But the sight of Valerie's lifeless body left her speechless. She took a deep breath and called for backup. As more officers arrived, they began to secure the crime scene. They immediately noticed the cleanliness of the bathroom, except for the signs of a struggle. There were no obvious fingerprints or signs of forced entry. While the police worked inside, the triplets were taken outside and given blankets to keep warm. The neighbors started to gather, whispering among themselves. Local news channels, including WBIR-TV, arrived to cover the breaking news. Reporters tried to get statements from the police and neighbors, but everyone was too shocked to say much. Ethan, Nathan, and Alan were taken to the police station to give their statements. They were still in a state of shock, struggling to understand what had happened. The police knew they had to act quickly to find out who was responsible for this horrific crime. When the Knoxville Police Department arrived at the Camden home on November 22, 2018, it was around 9:00 a.m. The sky was overcast, and the cold air hinted at the coming winter. Officers moved quickly to secure the area and keep onlookers away. Detective Catherine Bernard and Officer Daniel Ford led the investigation. They were known for their thorough and methodical work. Detective Bernard first spoke with Ethan, Nathan, and Alan Camden, who were still visibly shaken. She gently asked them to describe what happened, and then sent them to the station for detailed statements. Her primary focus now was on the crime scene. The master bathroom, where Valerie Camden's body was found, was eerily clean. Valerie lay naked in the shower, strangled with a rope. The scene suggested a struggle, but there were no signs of forced entry, and the rest of the house was undisturbed. Detective Bernard noted that this indicated the killer was someone Valerie knew and trusted. Detective Bernard and Officer Ford examined the bathroom carefully. The rope used to strangle Valerie was a simple, sturdy type, the kind you might find at a hardware store like Home Depot, known worldwide as America's friendliest big box store. They collected fingerprints from various surfaces, including the shower and door handles. The crime scene unit used luminol to detect any traces of blood that might have been cleaned up. Outside the house, the police set up perimeter. Neighbors gathered, whispering about the tragedy. Local news stations like WBIR-TV and the Knoxville News Sentinel sent reporters to cover the story. The media presence added pressure on the police to find answers quickly. Detective Bernard called in a forensic team to assist with the investigation. They photographed the scene, collected samples, and searched for any overlooked clues. The team also checked for surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses, hoping to find any suspicious activity. The police interviewed the Camden family's neighbors. One neighbor mentioned she saw a car she didn't recognize parked near the Camden house the night before. She couldn't recall the make or model but thought it was dark-colored. Another neighbor said he heard arguing coming from the Camden home earlier in the week, but he thought it was just a typical family disagreement you might hear around Thanksgiving. As the investigation continued, Detective Bernard and her team worked around the clock. They reviewed Valerie's phone records, emails, and social media accounts. They wanted to understand her relationships and any possible motives for her murder. The clean crime scene, the lack of forced entry, and the methodical nature of the murder pointed to a calculated and deliberate act. Detective Bernard knew this was just the beginning. They needed to dig deeper into Valerie's life and those closest to her to uncover the truth. Brett Camden, Valerie's 61-year-old second husband, was the first person the police investigated. Brett was an investment fund manager well known in Knoxville's financial circles. Outwardly, he seemed like a loving and supportive husband, but the police had to look deeper. Brett was at work when the police contacted him about Valerie's death. He appeared shocked and distraught, immediately driving to the police station. Detective Bernard met with him in a quiet room, where he slumped into a chair, his face pale. Brett explained that he had left for work early that morning and had no idea what happened to Valerie. He described their marriage as happy, but admitted they had their share of arguments, mostly about money. Valerie was in significant debt, around $200,000, due to the cost of raising her deaf triplets as a single mother. Brett said he tried to help, but it was a constant source of stress. The police asked Brett about his relationship with the triplets. He claimed to care for them deeply, even though he wasn't their biological father. Detective Bernard noted his calm and composed demeanor, but she also sensed he was hiding something. Brett's colleagues at his investment firm described him as a hard worker but very controlling. Some even mentioned he could be manipulative. This raised red flags for Detective Bernard. She dug deeper into Brett's personal life, interviewing friends and neighbors. Rumors surfaced that behind closed doors, Brett was not as loving as he appeared. Some neighbors said they heard loud arguments coming from the Camden house. One of Valerie's friends mentioned that Valerie once showed her a bird mark on her arm, which she claimed Brett had caused with a fireplace poker. The police brought Brett back for further questioning. This time, he seemed more nervous. Detective Bernard asked him directly about the bird marks and the rumors of him being controlling. Brett's calm facade cracked. He denied everything, but his voice was shaky. He insisted that he loved Valerie and would never hurt her. To confirm Brett's alibi, the police reviewed security footage from his office building. It showed Brett arriving at work at 7:00 a.m. as he claimed. However, there was a gap of about 30 minutes when Brett's whereabouts were unaccounted for. With more questions than answers, the police kept Brett under close watch. They needed more evidence to determine if Brett was involved in Valerie's murder. The investigation was far from over. Ethan Camden, one of Valerie's 19-year-old deaf triplets, was the second person the police investigated. Ethan had recently graduated from a school for the deaf and dreamed of becoming a graphic designer. However, he had struggled to find a job and had turned to drugs to cope with the stress and chaos at home. Ethan was known for his shy and reserved nature, often escaping into his art. When the police brought Ethan in for questioning, he looked scared and confused. Detective Bernard communicated with him through a sign language interpreter. She asked Ethan about his relationship with his mother and stepfather. Ethan described his mother as loving and supportive, but his feelings toward Brett were more complicated. He admitted that Brett was controlling and sometimes abusive, but he was too afraid to say anything more. Ethan had a weak alibi for the morning of Valerie's murder. He said he was at home, asleep in his room, but there were no witnesses to confirm this. Detective Bernard asked him about his drug use, and Ethan confessed to using marijuana to deal with his anxiety. He insisted that he would never hurt his mother, tears streaming down his face as he signed his responses. The police searched Ethan's room and found drug paraphernalia, but nothing that directly connected him to Valerie's murder. They also reviewed his social media accounts and phone records, looking for any clues. Ethan's online activity showed a young man struggling with his emotions, but not someone planning a murder. Detective Bernard interviewed Ethan's friends from death school. They described him as talented and quiet, often keeping to himself. Some friends mentioned that Ethan had talked about his stepfather's harsh behavior, but never hinted at any violent intentions. The investigation revealed that Ethan had been under immense pressure. The family's financial troubles, combined with the abuse he saw from Brett against his mother, had taken a toll on him. Detective Bernard considered Ethan a potential suspect due to his weak alibi and emotional turmoil, but she needed more concrete evidence. As the police continued to dig into Ethan's background, they found no solid proof linking him to the crime. Detective Bernard's intuition told her that Ethan was more of a victim in this situation, trapped in a toxic household. The focus of the investigation began to shift away from Ethan as new leads emerged. In late November 2018, the investigation into Valerie Camden's murder led the police to a third suspect, Nathan Camden, one of Valerie's triplets. Nathan, 19, was a star athlete on his deaf school's basketball team. His coaches often praised his dedication and talent. Nathan was outgoing, popular, and well-liked by his peers, but he struggled under the pressure of his stepfather's expectations and his need for approval. Nathan dreamed of playing basketball professionally. He had posters of NBA stars like LeBron James and Steph Curry on his bedroom walls. His friends saw him as cheerful and friendly, but those closer to him knew about the stress and fear he faced due to Brett's behavior. Detective Catherine Bernard and her team decided to bring Nathan in for questioning. On a crisp, cold morning in late November, they'd met Nathan at the police station. Through a sign language interpreter, Nathan shared his side of the story. He appeared nervous but cooperative with the investigators. Nathan explained that his relationship with Brett had always been strained. Brett's controlling nature and high expectations had caused Nathan significant stress. Brett often belittled him for not having six-pack abs, comparing him unfavorably to his brothers in looks. During the interrogation, Nathan revealed more about Brett's abusive behavior. He recounted instances where Brett had used threats and manipulation to control him and his brothers. Nathan's testimony painted a clearer picture of the toxic environment they had been living in. The police scrutinized Nathan's alibi for the night of Valerie's murder. Nathan claimed he had been at another deaf friend's house, watching the Tennessee Volunteers game on TV. His friend confirmed this alibi, and surveillance footage from a local convenience store showed Nathan and his friend buying snacks during the game. Despite Nathan's cooperation, the police needed more evidence to eliminate him as a suspect. They continued to investigate, analyzing phone records, messages, and other digital footprints. Throughout the day, the police worked diligently to gather all possible evidence from the crime scene to see if Nathan might be the killer. They knew that solving this case would require piecing together the puzzle of Valerie's fraught family relationships. On a chilly Saturday morning of November 24, 2018, a breakthrough came when a neighbor discovered a hidden USB drive in her attic while cleaning. Suspecting it didn't belong to her, she promptly contacted the authorities. Detective Bernard and Officer Daniel Ford responded swiftly, retrieving the USB drive from her home. Back at the police station, forensic experts examined the flash drive and found several video files. When they played the videos, they were horrified. The recordings showed Valerie's triplets, Ethan, Nathan, and Alan, undressing and performing suggestive dances while naked, some with quite complex choreography based on that of K-pop boy bands, both individually and as a group. The videos were addressed to someone named Jonathan, incidentally Brett's middle name. Detective Bernard felt sick as she watched the footage, vomiting profusely into a nearby trash can. It was clear that the triplets were being manipulated into a sexual relationship with someone, most likely Brett Camden, their stepfather. The police felt confident the videos revealed Brett Camden's dark secret. The police immediately brought Ethan, Nathan, and Alan back in for questioning. With the help of a sign language interpreter, the triplets shared their story. They explained how Brett had manipulated them for the past year into sexual relationships, pitting them against each other in various sex games with promises of more time spent with him for the winner. They said they had no idea there was anything wrong with that. Searching Brett's home office, the police discovered additional hidden USB drives containing sex tapes and a journal detailing Brett's disturbing relations with the triplets. In it, he detailed his secret relationship with the triplets, including graphic description of his sex games, and referring to the triplets as his boy harem. Detective Bernard knew this new evidence was crucial. It not only implicated Brett and Valerie's murder, but also uncovered a deeper level of abuse. With this new evidence, the police had a clearer picture of Brett's possible motive. Had he killed Valerie to keep his dark secrets hidden? Police knew Valerie would have planned to leave him and take the triplets with her if she found out. Could Brett, afraid of losing control and facing exposure, have decided to silence Valerie forever? As November 2018 drew to a close, the Knoxville police made a breakthrough in the Valerie Camden murder case. After weeks of investigation, the evidence pointed clearly to Brett Camden, Valerie's husband. Brett, 61, worked as an investment fund manager. Outwardly, he appeared to be a supportive and loving spouse, but the evidence painted a horrifyingly different picture. Brett was controlling and manipulative. He used threats and even physical violence to keep Valerie under his control. Even worse, the police uncovered a twisted and abusive sexual relationship between Brett and the triplets. He referred to them as his boy harem, exploiting their vulnerability and deafness to maintain his dominance. Detective Catherine Bernard and her team had pieced together Brett's motive for killing Valerie. Valerie had tired of his abuse and planned to lead Brett and take the triplets with her. Brett, afraid of losing his control and having his dark secrets exposed, decided to silence her forever. On the morning of November 30, 2018, with clear skies and a chilly breeze, the police moved in to arrest Brett Camden. They arrived at his upscale home in Knoxville's affluent neighborhood. Brett was taken by surprise when the officers, led by Detective Bernard, knocked on his door. He tried to maintain his composure, but it was evident he was shocked. Brett was handcuffed and read his rights. He showed little emotion, maintaining a cold and distant demeanor. As he was escorted to the police car, neighbors watched in disbelief. The arrest was a stark contrast to the facade Brett had maintained for so long. Valerie's family, especially her triplets, were relieved but emotionally shattered. They had lived in fear and manipulation for years. The news of Brett's arrest brought a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and anger. They hoped for justice and a chance to heal from the trauma they had endured. Detective Bernard was determined to ensure Brett faced the full consequences of his actions. She knew the case against him was strong, with the evidence gathered from the hidden USB drives, his journal, and the testimonies of the triplets. Brett's arrest marked a significant turning point in the investigation. The police had not only solved Valerie's murder, but also uncovered the horrifying abuse her family suffered under. The arrest of Brett Camden marked a significant step in the process, bringing closure to Valerie's grieving family and friends. The trial of Brett Camden began in early December 2018, just as the Knoxville community was preparing for the holiday season. The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators, all eager to hear the details of the case that had shocked the city. The prosecutor, Mark Schwartzel, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough on crime, laid out a compelling case against Brett. He detailed Brett's abusive behavior, the manipulation of the triplets, and the cold-blooded murder of Valerie Camden. Thompson presented the videos found on the USB drives, Brett's journal, and the testimonies of Ethan, Nathan, and Alan. The evidence painted a clear picture of Brett's guilt. On the defense side, attorney Lysandra Martinez, 50, known for her tenacity in defending difficult cases, argued that Brett was a loving husband and stepfather who had been wrongly accused. She tried to cast doubt on the triplets' testimonies, suggesting they were influenced by their desire to see Brett punished. However, the overwhelming evidence made it difficult for her to build a strong defense. Throughout the trial, Valerie's family sat in the front row, visibly emotional. The triplets, now free from Brett's control, bravely testified about the abuse they had endured. Their courage moved everyone in the courtroom. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning with a verdict. On December 15, 2018, Brett Camden was found guilty of first-degree murder and multiple counts of abuse. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Brett showed little reaction as the verdict was read, maintaining his cold and distant demeanor. The sentencing brought a sense of relief to Valerie's family, but the pain of losing her was still raw. Valerie's sister, Susan, expressed mixed feelings outside the courthouse. "We're grateful for justice, but nothing will bring Valerie back. Our focus now is on helping the boys heal and move forward." The trial's conclusion marked the end of a dark chapter for Valerie's family and the beginning of their journey toward healing. The community rallied around them, offering support and solidarity in the aftermath of their ordeal. After the trial ended in December 2018, life slowly began to move forward for those involved in the Valerie Camden case. The Knoxville community, still shocked by the revelations, came together to support Valerie's triplets, Ethan, Nathan, and Alan. Local organizations, like the Knoxville Center for the Deaf, offered resources and counseling to help them heal. Ethan, the aspiring graphic designer, found solace in his art. He received support from the local art community and even had some of his work displayed at a gallery downtown. He began taking classes at the University of Tennessee, determined to build a future in graphic design despite the trauma he had endured. Nathan, the star athlete, returned to basketball. His teammates and coaches at his deaf school rallied around him, offering encouragement and support. He continued to excel on the court, using the sport as an outlet for his emotions. Nathan also received several college scholarship offers, giving him hope for a brighter future. Alan, the third triplet, focused on his studies. He was always the quietest of the three, but with the support of his friends and family, he began to come out of his shell. He joined a local support group for victims of abuse, where he found comfort in sharing his experiences with others who had faced similar situations. Detective Catherine Bernard, who had led the investigation, was commended for her dedication and thorough work on the case. The Knoxville Police Department recognized her with a special award, and she continued to serve the community with the same commitment and integrity. Brett Camden, now serving a life sentence without parole, had little to say about his conviction. Reports from the prison indicated that he remained isolated and unrepentant. His arrest and trial had stripped away the facade of respectability he had maintained for so long. Valerie's sister, Susan, took on a more active role in the triplets' lives. She became their legal guardian and worked tirelessly to provide a stable and loving home for them. The community's support helped her navigate the challenges of raising three traumatized teenagers. The case left a lasting impact on Knoxville, reminding everyone of the importance of vigilance and support for those in abusive situations. As the triplets began to rebuild their lives, they carried with them the memory of their mother and the hope for a better future. The case of Valerie Camden's murder is a haunting reminder of the hidden darkness that can lurk behind closed doors. Her strength and resilience continue to inspire those who knew her, while the justice served ensures that her tragic story will not be forgotten. Harold Hal Griffin was a man many people in Kokomo, Indiana, knew well. At 63 years old, he had spent over 3 decades managing a grocery store chain that was popular in the community. Hal had a way of making people feel welcome, whether they were customers or employees. His friendly smile and sharp business skills made him respected in his hometown. After retiring, Hal moved to Prescott, Arizona, in search of a quieter life. Prescott, known for its mild weather and beautiful landscapes, was a popular destination for retirees. Hal settled into this peaceful town, spending his days gardening, attending local events, and relaxing. But Hal's life wasn't as simple as it appeared. His marriage to Mary had been troubled for years, mostly because of her declining health. Mary had been diagnosed with brain cancer, which had taken a toll on both of them. Hal, feeling lonely and emotionally drained, started looking for comfort elsewhere. He began seeing other men for sex, but only a few close friends knew about this very secret part of his life. Hal found particular comfort in sexual relationships with 2 other men, Leonard Bartholf and Pete Peterson. Lenny, a 60-year-old retired banker from Minnesota, had been Hal's first male lover. Lenny was deeply attached to Hal, believing they would eventually be together once Mary's health declined further. The third person in this love triangle was Pete Peterson, a 56-year-old insurance adjuster who also lived in Prescott. Pete's relationship with Hal was more casual, with the two meeting every now and then for quick sex, but he secretly hoped that Hal would leave both Mary and Lenny to start a new life with him. In the days leading up to his death, Hal seemed preoccupied. He had confided in a close friend that he was considering making big changes in his life. Hal was torn between his responsibilities at home and his desires for freedom and happiness. Unfortunately, his hopes for a fresh start would be cut short by the tragic events that soon unfolded. On the afternoon of July 15, 2011, Prescott, Arizona, was experiencing its typical summer weather, hot and dry, with temperatures reaching the mid-90s. It was around 2:30 p.m. when Mary Griffin, Hal's wife, realized she hadn't seen him all day. This was unusual, as Hal usually spent his mornings tending to his garden or reading the newspaper on the porch. Concerned, Mary decided to check the house, starting with the kitchen, where Hal often prepared their lunch. As she entered the kitchen, Mary was met with a scene of horror. Hal was lying on the floor in a pool of blood, his body still and lifeless. He had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and abdomen. The kitchen was in disarray, with broken dishes and overturned chairs scattered around the room, evidence of a violent struggle. The sight overwhelmed Mary, who was already frail due to her illness. Her initial reaction was shock, followed by a wave of panic. Struggling to maintain her composure, Mary managed to dial 911, her voice trembling as she reported what she had found. The 911 operator, sensing the urgency in Mary's voice, immediately dispatched police and emergency medical services to the Griffin residence. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Hal had been dead for several hours by the time they arrived. Mary, distraught and in shock, was taken to the hospital as a precaution. She was unable to provide much information to the authorities, her mind struggling to process the horrific scene she had just witnessed. The discovery of Hal's body sent shockwaves through the quiet Prescott community. Neighbors, who were used to the tranquility of their retirement paradise, were suddenly thrust into the middle of a murder investigation. As news spread, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Something terrible had happened in the Griffin household, and the search for answers was just beginning. Detective Robert Bob Jensen arrived at the Griffin residence on the afternoon of July 15, 2011. The summer heat was intense, with temperatures soaring into the mid-90s, typical for Prescott, Arizona in July. Jensen was a seasoned investigator with the Prescott Police Department, known for his methodical approach and keen attention to detail. He had seen his fair share of crime scenes, but the brutal nature of this one immediately struck him as a crime of passion. The kitchen was in chaos. Blood splattered the walls and floor, and a pool of blood surrounded Hal Griffin's lifeless body. A kitchen knife, the apparent murder weapon, lay nearby, covered in blood. The scene suggested a violent struggle. Broken dishes, an overturned chair, and scattered items indicated that Hal had fought desperately for his life. Jensen carefully stepped around the evidence, noting every detail. He knew that every piece of the puzzle could be crucial in solving this case. Jensen was joined by Officer Ophelia Lopez, a young but sharp member of the team, who had a reputation for her quick thinking. Together, they began their initial assessment of the scene. Jensen noticed that the house showed no signs of forced entry, which led him to believe that Hal had known his attacker. The struggle appeared to have been contained to the kitchen, with no evidence of the fight spilling into other parts of the house. As the detectives worked, forensic technicians arrived to document the scene. They took photographs, collected samples of the blood, and dusted for fingerprints. The technicians also swabbed the knife for DNA evidence, hoping to find something that would lead them to the killer. Jensen observed as they bagged the knife and other key pieces of evidence, knowing these would be crucial in the investigation. Outside, the neighbors were beginning to gather, whispering among themselves. Prescott was a quiet town, and a murder like this was a rare and shocking event. As Jensen stepped out to speak with some of the onlookers, he was met with a mix of fear and curiosity. Many knew Hal as a friendly, easygoing man, making the violent nature of his death even more unsettling. Back inside, Jensen and Lopez continued their examination. They were particularly interested in the timeline of events. When had Hal last been seen alive, and who could have had access to the house during that time? Jensen made a mental note to interview Hal's wife, Mary, as soon as she was able to speak, knowing that her testimony could provide crucial insights. The investigation was just beginning, but one thing was clear to Jensen: this was no random act of violence. The ferocity of the attack and the lack of forced entry pointed to a killer with a personal connection to Hal, someone who had been driven by strong emotions. The task now was to uncover who that person was and why they had turned to murder. Leonard "Lenny" Bartholf, 60, was the first person of interest in the investigation. Lenny had been living with Hal and Mary Griffin for nearly a year under the pretense of being a down-on-his-luck friend whom Hal had taken in. In reality, Lenny was much more than a house guest. He was Hal's secret gay lover. Their relationship had been ongoing for several years, beginning back in Indiana before Hal's retirement. Lenny, a retired banker, was known for his meticulous and conservative nature. He had worked at the same bank for 40 years before retiring to Arizona. Lenny had always been a reserved and disciplined man, qualities that had served him well in his banking career. However, beneath this calm exterior, Lenny was deeply in love with Hal and harbored intense feelings of jealousy and insecurity. He had hoped that once Mary's health declined further and she succumbed to her cancer, he and Hal could be together openly. Lenny was protective of Hal, often to the point of possessiveness, and he had struggled with the knowledge that Hal had sexual relationships with other men, particularly Pete Peterson. Detective Robert Jensen and Officer Ophelia Lopez brought Lenny in for questioning on July 16, the day after Hal's body was found. The interrogation took place in a small, windowless room at the Prescott Police Department. Lenny appeared nervous but composed, his hands shaking slightly as he answered their questions. Jensen, who was known for his calm yet probing interrogation style, began by asking Lenny about his relationship with Hal. Lenny hesitated but eventually admitted to their romantic involvement, his voice cracking as he spoke. He insisted that he loved Hal deeply and would never hurt him. Jensen then asked Lenny about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Lenny claimed that he had been asleep in his room and had not heard anything unusual. However, Jensen noticed that Lenny's story had some inconsistencies. For example, Lenny couldn't explain why he hadn't heard the struggle that had clearly taken place in the kitchen, just a few rooms away. When pressed further, Lenny became agitated, raising his voice and demanding to know why he was being accused of something so horrible. The detectives also asked Lenny about his relationship with Pete Peterson, Hal's other lover. Lenny's demeanor shifted noticeably at the mention of Pete. His jealousy was evident as he spoke bitterly about Pete, accusing him of trying to come between him and Hal. Lenny's resentment towards Pete was clear, and it gave the detectives a possible motive: jealousy and fear of losing Hal. Despite Lenny's emotional responses and the inconsistencies in his story, he denied any involvement in Hal's murder. The detectives released him after several hours of questioning, but he remained a key suspect. Jensen couldn't shake the feeling that Lenny was hiding something, and he knew they needed more evidence to either prove or disprove Lenny's involvement in the crime. The second suspect in Hal Griffin's murder was his wife, Mary Griffin. At 61, Mary had once been a vibrant and active woman, known around Prescott for her involvement in local church activities and charity work. However, her life had taken a drastic turn recently after being diagnosed with brain cancer. The illness had left her weak and dependent on Hal for nearly all her daily needs. Though Mary had always been sweet-natured, the cancer had taken a toll on her memory and cognitive abilities, often leaving her confused and forgetful. Despite her illness, Mary's love for Hal was undeniable. Their marriage had transitioned to become more of a caretaker relationship, with Hal dedicating much of his time to looking after her. However, those close to the couple had noticed that Mary seemed troubled in the months leading up to Hal's death. She had moments of clarity where she appeared aware that something was amiss in her marriage, but she couldn't fully grasp the reality of Hal's secret life. Detective Robert Jensen and Officer Ophelia Lopez decided to question Mary on July 17, 2011, 2 days after Hal's body was found. They visited her at the hospital where she was being treated for the moment. A hospital was a quiet, sterile environment, far removed from the violence seen at the Griffin home. Mary was resting in bed, looking frail and tired, but she managed a weak smile when the detectives entered the room. Jensen approached the interview with care, knowing that Mary's mental state could affect her responses. He began by asking her about her relationship with Hal. Mary spoke lovingly of her husband, recalling their early years together and how he had always been there for her during her illness. She mentioned how Hal had become more distant recently, often leaving the house for long periods without explaining where he had been. However, she dismissed these thoughts, attributing them to her illness rather than anything Hal had done. The detectives then asked Mary about the night of the murder. Mary struggled to remember specific details, a common symptom of her condition. She couldn't recall hearing anything unusual that night and was genuinely shocked when she learned of Hal's death. Tears welled up in her eyes as she expressed disbelief that someone could harm the man who had cared for her so lovingly. When asked if she knew about Hal's relationships with other men, Mary seemed confused. She hesitated, then shook her head, saying that Hal had always been devoted to her. However, Jensen noted that Mary's confusion could be masking deeper emotions. Perhaps a buried awareness of Hal's affairs or a fear that she wasn't the only one in his life. Despite her frail condition, Mary remained a suspect, if only because she was Hal's wife and had the closest relationship with him. However, the detectives knew that without clear evidence or a more coherent testimony, it would be difficult to build a case against her. For now, they would have to keep looking for more concrete leads. The third suspect in Hal Griffin's murder was Pete Peterson, a 56-year-old insurance adjuster who had been living in Prescott for several years. Pete was known in the community for his calm, steady demeanor and his predictable routine. He was the kind of man who enjoyed a simple, quiet life, and he was often seen at local diners like Denny's or grabbing coffee at Dutch Brothers. Pete's involvement in a sexual relationship with Hal was not well known, but those who were aware of their relationship described it as mainly being casual sex, unlike Hal's more intense connection with Lenny Bartholf. Pete had been seeing Hal for about a year, meeting discreetly for sex whenever and wherever they could. To Pete, their relationship was more about companionship and physical comfort than deep emotional ties. He knew about Lenny and even saw him as competition, but he wasn't overly concerned. Pete had pushed Hal to leave Mary and Lenny behind and start fresh with him, but Hal had always been hesitant to make such a drastic move. On July 18, 2011, 3 days after Hal's body was discovered, detectives Robert Jensen and Ophelia Lopez brought Pete in for questioning. Pete arrived at the Prescott Police Department dressed neatly, his expression calm but wary. The detectives, aware of Pete's steady personality, expected him to be cooperative, but were prepared to dig deeper if needed. Jensen began the interview by asking Pete about his relationship with Hal. Pete was upfront about their sexual involvement, describing it as casual and admitting that they had seen each other off and on for sex for about a year. He spoke in a measured tone, careful with his words, and avoided giving too much detail about their relationship. When Jensen asked if Pete had known about Lenny, Pete's face hardened slightly. He acknowledged that he knew about Lenny, but claimed he didn't see him as a serious rival. Hal was his own man, Pete said. He loved who he loved. The conversation then turned to the night of the murder. Pete explained that he had been home alone, watching television, specifically reruns of Law and Order, Special Victims Unit on USA Network, and had gone to bed early. He insisted that he hadn't seen Hal that day and that they hadn't spoken for a few days before the murder. His alibi was simple, but the detectives couldn't find anything to directly contradict it. When pressed about his feelings towards Hal and the possibility of Hal leaving him for Lenny, Pete's calm exterior began to crack. He admitted that the idea of losing Hal had upset him, but he quickly composed himself, stating that he wasn't the kind of person to act out of anger. However, Jensen noticed a flicker of emotion in Pete's eyes, something that hinted at a deeper, more complex relationship with Hal than Pete was willing to admit. After several hours of questioning, the detectives released Pete. Although he had remained mostly calm and cooperative, they were left with a sense that there was more to his story. Pete's steady demeanor, while reassuring, also made it difficult to gauge his true feelings. The detectives knew they needed to keep an eye on Pete as they continued to unravel the tangled relationships surrounding Hal Griffin's death. On July 20, 2011, 5 days after Hal Griffin's body was discovered, the Prescott Police Department received a crucial lead in the case. The day was hot and dry, typical for an Arizona summer, with temperatures hovering around 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Detective Robert Jensen had just finished reviewing the initial reports when a call came in from a local hardware store, True Value, located off Gurley Street. The store manager reported that someone had found something unusual in the dumpster behind the store. Jensen and his partner, Officer Ophelia Lopez, quickly drove to the scene. The hardware store was a familiar spot in Prescott, known for its friendly service and wide selection of tools and supplies. When they arrived, the manager led them to the back of the store where the dumpsters were located. A smell of garbage and the buzz of flies filled the air as Tom pointed to a large black trash bag sitting on top of the pile. Inside the bag, Jensen and Lopez found a blood-stained shirt and a pair of gloves. The shirt was torn and soaked with blood, clearly connected to the violent crime that had taken place in Hal Griffin's home. The gloves were made of latex, the kind commonly used for cleaning or handling chemicals, but they were also smeared with dried blood. Jensen carefully bagged the items as evidence and immediately had them sent to the crime lab for analysis. While waiting for the results, the detectives reviewed the security footage from the hardware store. Unfortunately, the camera angle didn't capture the exact spot where the bag had been dumped, but it did show a shadowy figure moving near the dumpsters late at night. The footage was grainy, and the person's identity was unclear, but it gave the detectives a timeline for when the evidence was likely discarded. A few days later, the lab results came back, confirming that the blood on the shirt and gloves matched Hal Griffin's DNA. This was a significant breakthrough in the case, suggesting that the person who dumped the bag had been directly involved in the murder. The discovery also indicated that the killer had attempted to dispose of evidence in a hurry, possibly panicking after the crime. The police now had a strong piece of evidence that could link the suspects to the crime. Jensen and Lopez knew they were closing in on the truth, but they still needed to determine who had thrown the bag into the dumpster and why. The investigation intensified as they worked to connect this new evidence to one of the suspects they had already questioned. On July 24, 2011, just over a week after Hal Griffin's body was discovered, the Prescott Police Department made a breakthrough in the case. The analysis of the blood-stained shirt and gloves found in the True Value hardware store dumpster had revealed something crucial, a partial fingerprint on one of the latex gloves. After running the print through the national database, it matched Leonard Bartholf, Hal's longtime lover. Lenny Bartholf, a 60-year-old retired banker, had been living with Hal and his wife, Mary, under the guise of being a down-and-out man Hal had taken in. In reality, Lenny and Hal had been involved in a secret sexual relationship for several years, a fact that was unknown to most people in Prescott. Lenny was deeply in love with Hal and believed that once Mary's health deteriorated, they would be together openly. But Lenny had grown increasingly paranoid about Hal's other relationships, particularly with Pete Peterson, the calm, placid insurance adjuster who had been a casual sex partner of Hal's. On the night of July 15, Lenny had confronted Hal in the kitchen of their Prescott home. Lenny had heard rumors that Hal was planning to leave him and start a new life with Pete. Fueled by jealousy and fear of losing the only person he truly loved, Lenny demanded answers. Hal, feeling cornered, admitted that he had considered leaving Prescott with Pete. This confession pushed Lenny over the edge. In a fit of rage and heartbreak, he grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed Hal multiple times in the chest and abdomen. After the murder, Lenny panicked. Realizing the gravity of what he had done, he attempted to clean up the scene, but the mess was too overwhelming. In his haste, he grabbed the blood-stained shirt and gloves, stuffed them into a trash bag, and drove to the True Value hardware store, where he dumped the bag in the dumpster. He hoped this would cover his tracks, but the discovery of the items led the police straight to him. On the afternoon of July 24, the police arrived at the Griffin home with an arrest warrant for Lenny. He was in the backyard, tending to Mary's garden, when detectives Robert Jensen and Ophelia Lopez approached him. Lenny didn't resist arrest. He was visibly shaken but showed no surprise when they informed him of the charges. He quietly admitted to the crime, saying he hadn't meant to kill Hal but couldn't control his anger. Hal's family, particularly Mary, was devastated by the arrest. Mary, still battling brain cancer, was in shock, unable to comprehend that her husband had been living a double life and that Lenny, whom she had trusted, was his killer. The news spread quickly through Prescott, shocking the small community that had known Hal as a friendly, outgoing retiree. The arrest of Lenny Bartholf marked the beginning of the end for this tragic case. The police had pieced together the puzzle, revealing a story of love, jealousy, and betrayal that had led to a deadly outcome. But the full story would only come to light in a courtroom, where Lenny would face justice for his actions. The trial of Leonard Lenny Bartholf began on October 3, 2011, in the Yavapai County Courthouse in Prescott, Arizona. The case had garnered attention, not only because of the brutal nature of the crime, but also due to the scandalous details of Hal Griffin's secret life that had come to light. The courtroom was packed with locals eager to delve into the story of love, betrayal, and murder in this quiet retirement community. The prosecution was led by District Attorney James McLean, a seasoned lawyer known for his no-nonsense approach in the courtroom. McLean, a 58-year-old with a reputation for being tough but fair, laid out a compelling case against Lenny. He argued that Lenny's actions were premeditated, driven by jealousy and a deep fear of abandonment. McLean detailed how Lenny had lived a double life, pretending to be a homeless man taken in out of charity, while secretly maintaining a romantic relationship with Hal. He painted a picture of a man who couldn't bear the thought of losing Hal to Pete Peterson, and in a fit of rage, had murdered the very person he claimed to love. The defense, led by public defender Frankie Clark, took a different approach. Clark, a 42-year-old lawyer with a calm demeanor, argued that Lenny's actions were not premeditated, but were instead the result of a momentary lapse in control. She portrayed Lenny as a man who had been deeply in love, confused, and heartbroken by Hal's admission that he was planning to leave him. Clark emphasized Lenny's clean record, his service at the bank for 40 years, and his role as a quiet, disciplined member of society who had never shown signs of violence before this incident. She appealed to the jury's sympathy, asking them to consider the emotional turmoil that had led Lenny to commit the crime. Throughout the trial, Hal Griffin's family watched the proceedings with a mix of sadness and anger. Mary Griffin, frail and devastated, sat quietly as the details of her husband's double life were exposed to the world. The betrayal was almost as painful as the murder itself, and her emotions were evident as she listened to the arguments. After 2 weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury reached a verdict. On October 17, 2011, Leonard Bartholf was found guilty of second-degree murder. The jury believed that while Lenny's actions were driven by emotion, they were still deliberate and intentional. Judge Martin Harris sentenced Lenny to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole, a sentence that reflected the seriousness of the crime but also took into account Lenny's previously clean record and the emotional circumstances surrounding the case. The sentence brought a sense of closure to Hal Griffin's family, though it didn't erase the pain of losing him. For Mary Griffin, it was a bittersweet moment. Justice had been served, but the cost had been the shattering of the life she thought she knew. As for the Prescott community, the trial and its outcome left a lasting impact, a reminder that even in the most peaceful places, dark secrets can lead to tragic consequences. After the trial, life for those involved in the tragic events of July 2011 changed dramatically. Mildred Laila, a retired nurse aged 68, resided in Centerville, Ohio, a quiet suburban town nestled in the heartland of America. Known for her forceful nature and sharp tongue, Mildred was a force to be reckoned with in her community. Her days were spent in a small, modest house on Elm Street on Centerville's east side, where she lived alone. Despite her solitude, Mildred was never short of drama. She had a reputation for meddling in her family members' affairs, imposing her opinions and judgments on them with an iron fist. Her fierce loyalty, however, was unquestionable. She was willing to go to great lengths to protect her loved ones, even if it meant resorting to violence or crossing ethical boundaries. Mildred's difficult personality often led to heated confrontations within her family. Arguments would escalate and tempers would flare. The tension was frequently palpable, and neighbors would overhear the occasional shouting match. Rumors of Mildred's controlling nature spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community. But behind closed doors, there was more to Mildred than met the eye. She had a secret life, hidden beneath her stern exterior. Friends and neighbors were unaware of the depths of her darkness, the secrets she kept locked away. The facade she presented to the world was just that, a facade. As we delve deeper into Mildred's story, we will explore the events that unfolded in Centerville, Ohio, in July 1991. We will uncover the shocking secrets that lay dormant, waiting to be revealed. Join us as we piece together the puzzle of Mildred's life and the tragic turn it took. On a fateful summer morning in the quaint town of Centerville, Ohio, the tight-knit community was abruptly jolted from its peaceful slumber. July 18th, 1991 would forever be etched in the collective memory of Centerville's residents, as it marked the shocking discovery of Mildred Laila's lifeless body. Mildred, a retired nurse who had dedicated her life to caring for her family, met a tragic end within the confines of her own home on Elm Street. The tranquility of her sleep was abruptly shattered as a pillow was callously placed over her face, suffocating her in the darkness of the night. It was Angela Laila, Mildred's daughter-in-law, who stumbled upon this gruesome scene. The morning sun had just begun to cast its warm glow upon the world when Angela, with a mix of trepidation and curiosity, ventured into Mildred's bedroom. The sight that greeted her was nothing short of a nightmare. Angela's heart raced as she took in the surreal tableau before her. Her mother-in-law lay motionless on the bed, her face buried beneath the weight of the pillow. Panic and disbelief washed over Angela, her mind struggling to comprehend the horrifying reality that she had unwittingly stumbled upon. With trembling hands, Angela reached for the kitchen phone and dialed the emergency number, her voice quivering as she relayed the chilling details to the operator. The seconds stretched into an eternity as she anxiously awaited the arrival of the authorities, their presence offering a glimmer of hope in the face of this unimaginable tragedy. News of Mildred's untimely demise quickly spread throughout Centerville, a town unaccustomed to much gossip but no such heinous acts of violence. The tight-knit community, usually united in their shared sense of security, now found themselves gripped by fear and uncertainty. Whispers of speculation and theories filled the air, as neighbors huddled together, seeking solace and answers amidst the chaos. In the boringly quiet town of Centerville, Ohio, a dark cloud descended upon its close-knit Rust Belt community. The life of Mildred Laila, a retired nurse, took a tragic turn that fateful day. Known for her stern and serious nature, Mildred's demise would leave the town in shock and disbelief. Mildred, 68, was not one to shy away from expressing her opinions and judgments. Her sharp tongue and domineering personality often left her family members feeling suffocated. She meddled in their affairs, imposing her will on them with an iron fist. Despite her abrasive demeanor, Mildred's loyalty to her family knew no bounds. She was willing to go to great lengths to protect them, even if it meant crossing ethical boundaries or resorting to violence. It was on a warm July morning when Angela Laila, Mildred's daughter-in-law, made the horrifying discovery of Mildred's corpse. The Centerville Police Department responded swiftly to the distressing call. Detective Rollo Worster and Officer Oscar Grelovich were assigned to the case. With meticulous attention to detail, they combed through the crime scene, searching for any clues that would unravel the truth behind Mildred's untimely death. As they entered the room, the detectives were struck by the eerie cleanliness. There were no signs of struggle or forced entry, leaving them puzzled. The cause of death, suffocation, was determined through a thorough examination, but the question of who was responsible remained unanswered. Detective Worster and Officer Grelovich turned their attention to Mildred's personal life, hoping to uncover any potential motives or suspects. They interviewed family members, neighbors, and friends, piecing together the puzzle of her final days. Rumors circulated throughout the town, speculating on hidden secrets and clandestine affairs. The investigation into Mildred Laila's death captivated the small community of Centerville. Local newspapers and television stations covered the case extensively, with headlines splashed across the front pages. The town's residents were on edge, questioning their own safety and the trust they had placed in their neighbors. As the days turned into weeks, Detective Worster and Officer Grelovich tirelessly pursued every lead, determined to bring justice to Mildred and closure to the community. Their investigation would uncover a web of deceit, betrayal, and secrets that would shock Centerville to its core. Angela Laila, a 38-year-old woman from Centerville, Ohio, found herself at the center of a shocking crime investigation in July 1991. Angela, known for her kind-hearted nature and gentle demeanor, had long endured the torment of her mother-in-law, Mildred Laila. Mildred, a retired nurse and a woman of strong will, had a reputation for being stern and controlling. Her sharp tongue and domineering nature made her a force to be reckoned with in the Laila family. Angela, as her only daughter-in-law, bore the brunt of Mildred's wrath, enduring years of constant criticism and even physical abuse. The police, led by Detective Rollo Worster and Officer Oscar Grelovich, focused their attention on Angela as the prime suspect in Mildred's tragic demise. The investigation aimed to uncover any possible motives that Angela might have had for committing such a heinous crime. During the interrogation, Angela's emotions were a mix of anger, frustration, and relief. Anger, stemming from the years of mistreatment she had endured at the hands of Mildred. Frustration, as she had often felt trapped and powerless in her own home. And finally, relief, as the burden of Mildred's control was finally lifted from her shoulders. The detectives delved into Angela's past, seeking to understand the dynamics of her relationship with Mildred. They discovered a pattern of abuse that stretched back years, with Angela enduring not only verbal assaults, but also physical beatings and even vicious whippings that would leave a legacy of scars on her back. The investigators meticulously documented the instances of abuse, building a case that would shed light on the toxic environment in which Angela had lived. As the investigation progressed, the detectives sought out witnesses who could provide insight into the volatile relationship between Mildred and Angela. Friends and neighbors were interviewed, painting a picture of a woman who ruled her family with an iron fist. The stories of Mildred's controlling behavior were corroborated by multiple sources, further strengthening Angela's claims of abuse. Despite the mounting evidence against Angela, the detectives remained open to other possibilities. They explored alternative theories, considering the potential involvement of other family members or even an unknown assailant. The investigation was far from over, and the truth behind Mildred's tragic demise still eluded the authorities. Jack Labrilla, a 40-year-old man and owner of the local Pizza Hut, became another person of interest in the ongoing investigation into the tragic death of his mother, Mildred Labrilla. As authorities delved deeper into the case, they uncovered a complex web of family dynamics and a history of physical and emotional abuse that may shed light on Jack's potential involvement. Jack, known for his passive demeanor and aversion to conflict, had long endured his mother's domineering personality. Over the decades, Mildred subjected Jack to near constant physical abuse, leaving him with deep emotional and physical scars. Despite the torment he endured, Jack chose to avoid confrontation, opting instead to maintain a semblance of peace within the family. However, his love and loyalty towards his wife, Angela Labrilla, may have pushed Jack to consider drastic measures to protect his family. Angela, who had also been questioned as a suspect, endured years of Mildred's constant criticism and even physical abuse. The couple had long dreamt of a life free from Mildred's oppressive presence, and the tension within the family had reached its breaking point. In the weeks leading up to the tragic event, neighbors reported witnessing heated vitriol between Mildred and Jack. These disputes often revolved around Angela and the couple's desire to break free from Mildred's control. The tension within the household had become palpable, and friends and family members had noticed a change in Jack's behavior. He appeared on edge and increasingly distant, as if burdened by a heavy secret. As investigators meticulously combed through the evidence, they are piecing together a timeline of events leading up to Mildred's death, scrutinizing Jack's movements and interactions in the days and hours preceding the crime, hoping to uncover any clues that may point to his involvement. The police also examined phone records and financial transactions to determine if Jack had any motive or opportunity to carry out such a heinous act. The investigation into the murder of Mildred Labrilla took a surprising turn when new evidence emerged, revealing a web of dark secrets within the peaceful town of Centerville, Ohio. On a stormy night in August 1991, Lana Briscoe, a neighbor of the Labrilla family, made a startling discovery that would send shockwaves through the community. Lana, a curious and observant woman, had always suspected that there was more to Mildred's life than met the eye. As she rummaged through her attic, searching for an old photo album, she stumbled upon a dusty box tucked away in a corner. Intrigued, Lana opened it and found a collection of letters, carefully preserved over the years. To her astonishment, the letters were exchanges between Mildred and her own daughter, Jana. The contents of these letters painted a picture of a complex and tumultuous sexual relationship. They revealed a love that was tainted by deep-seated resentment and a constant power struggle. As Lana read through the letters, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The words on the pages were filled with anger, frustration, and a longing for freedom. It was clear that Jana, despite her love for her mother, harbored a deep-seated hatred towards her. The letters detailed the emotional and psychological abuse that Mildred had subjected Jana to throughout their relationship. They spoke of a woman who controlled every aspect of her daughter's existence, leaving her feeling trapped and suffocated. It became evident that Jana's relationship with Mildred was far from an idyllic May-December love story. The police were stunned by this revelation. They had initially focused their investigation on Angela, Mildred's daughter-in-law, and Jack, her son. But now, with the emergence of these letters, Jana became a potential suspect as well. The detectives delved deeper into Jana's life, searching for any signs of motive or opportunity. In the small town of Centerville, Ohio, the investigation into the tragic murder of Mildred Labrilla took an unexpected turn when a new suspect emerged. Jana Briscoe, a 19-year-old neighbor known for her nosy nature and penchant for gossip, found herself under the watchful eye of law enforcement. Jana, with her outwardly friendly demeanor, had managed to hide a deep-seated resentment towards Mildred. But what shocked the police even more was the revelation of a secret sexual affair between the two women. As Lana Briscoe, a a neighbor of Mildred and Jana's mother, stumbled upon a hidden stash of love letters exchanged between Mildred and Jana. The police realized they had a potential motive on their hands. During the interrogation, Jana's emotions were a mix of anger, guilt, and a twisted sense of satisfaction. She revealed that her relationship with Mildred was a complicated web of love and resentment. Jana had long been drawn to Mildred's domineering personality, but at the same time, she harbored deep-seated anger towards her. As the police dug deeper into Jana's background, they discovered a troubled past. Jana had always been an outsider, struggling to fit in with her peers. She found solace in her secret sexual relationship with Mildred, a woman who seemed to understand her in a way no one else did. But this connection was tainted by the constant power struggle between them. Jana's resentment towards Mildred stemmed from years of feeling controlled and manipulated. She resented the way Mildred used their relationship as a means of exerting power over her. The police began to piece together a motive, as Jana's desire to break free from Mildred's control became increasingly evident. The investigation into Jana's involvement in Mildred's murder continued, as the police delved into her alibi and gathered evidence. They meticulously combed through phone records, interviewed witnesses, and analyzed the letters exchanged between Jana and Mildred. As the town of Centerville buzzed with speculation, the police were determined to uncover the truth. The investigation into Jana Briscoe's potential role in the murder of Mildred Laila was far from over. In a stunning turn of events, the Centerville Police Department identified Angela Laila, 38, as the perpetrator behind the heinous murder of Mildred Laila, her mother-in-law. After an exhaustive investigation, Angela's motive for the crime was revealed, shedding light on the dark secrets that plagued this close-knit community in 1991. The investigation into Mildred's death began when Angela, who had endured years of abuse at the hands of her mother-in-law, made the horrifying discovery of Mildred's lifeless body. The scene was chilling, with a pillow placed forcefully over Mildred's face, suffocating her in her sleep. Angela, overwhelmed with shock and disbelief, immediately alerted the authorities, setting into motion a chain of events that would unravel the truth behind this tragic incident. As the investigation progressed, Angela, despite being known for her gentle demeanor and kind-hearted nature, emerged as the prime suspect. Her tumultuous relationship with Mildred, marked by constant criticism and physical abuse, including beatings and even whippings, provided a motive for the crime. The police interrogated Angela, desperate to uncover the truth behind Mildred's demise. Her response was a mix of anger, frustration, and a glimmer of relief, as she finally felt free from Mildred's control. After painstakingly piecing together the puzzle, the police ultimately identified Angela Laila as the murderer. Motivated by a desperate desire to escape Mildred's controlling influence and to protect her family from further harm, Angela took matters into her own hands. Suffocating Mildred with a pillow, she sought to free herself from her mother-in-law's grip and ensure her family's safety. The murder was a tragic consequence of Angela's fear and frustration as she sought to regain control over her own life. The trial that followed Angela Laila's arrest was a gripping and emotional journey that captivated the residents of Centerville, Ohio. District Attorney Brianna Alfonsi, known for her tenacity and sharp legal skills, led the prosecution's case against Angela. The courtroom was filled with tension as the trial unfolded, with the victim's family, friends, and curious onlookers anxiously awaiting justice. During the trial, the prosecution meticulously presented their evidence, aiming to prove Angela's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They showcased the pillow used to suffocate Mildred Laila, expertly linking it to Angela through DNA analysis. They also called upon witnesses, including neighbors who had heard heated arguments between Angela and Mildred, as well as medical professionals who testified to the extent of Mildred's physical abuse. Defense attorney Michael Carl Shrew, renowned for his ability to empathize with his clients, fought tirelessly to present Angela's side of the story. He painted a picture of a woman pushed to her limits, trapped in an abusive relationship with her mother-in-law. Shrew argued that Angela's actions were driven by desperation and a genuine fear for her family's safety. After days of intense deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Angela Laila was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions, with some expressing relief that justice had been served, while others questioned whether Angela's desperate circumstances should have been taken into account. Judge Mary Breedlove, known for her strict adherence to the law, delivered the sentencing. Angela was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom fell silent as the weight of the sentence sank in. Some found solace in the closure the sentencing brought, believing that Mildred's death had been avenged. Others, however, felt a sense of unease, wondering if Angela's punishment truly reflected the complexity of the situation. Following the conclusion of the trial, the lives of all those involved were forever altered. Angela Laila, now serving a life sentence, grappled with the profound repercussions of her actions. Confined within the walls of the Centerville Correctional Facility, Angela faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life behind bars. The routine of prison life became her new reality, as she navigated the daily challenges and sought solace in the limited freedoms she still possessed. Meanwhile, Jack Laila, finally liberated from the clutches of his domineering mother, embarked on a journey of self-discovery and healing. With the weight of his mother's influence lifted, Jack focused on rebuilding his shattered life and protecting his family from further harm. He immersed himself in his work at the local Pizza Hut, a popular dining choice for this Midwestern community starved of places to eat. Jana Briscoe, burdened by the weight of guilt and regret, embarked on a path of redemption. Haunted by her secret affair with Mildred and the role it played in the tragic events that unfolded, Jana sought solace in the support of her family and the guidance of a therapist. In the aftermath of the trial, questions lingered in the minds of many. Some questioned whether justice had truly been served, while others found solace in the closure the trial brought. The impact of Mildred's death reverberated throughout the community, serving as a stark reminder of the destructive power of control and the lengths some will go to escape it. Laura Bennett was a 42-year-old woman who owned a hair salon in Waterloo, Iowa. Her salon, Laura's Hair Haven, was the only one for hundreds of miles in this part of the Midwest where hoodies are considered common wedding attire. She was very dedicated to her clients, many of whom became her friends. Laura was known for her charm and bubbly personality. She always greeted everyone with a smile and made them feel welcome. Laura was also an active member of the community. She often volunteered at local shelters and participated in neighborhood events. She organized fundraisers and charity events, always looking for ways to help others. Laura was passionate about her work and her family. She loved styling hair and dreamed of expanding her salon business. She hoped to open a second location in the nearby town of Cedar Rapids. Laura lived in a cozy house on Maple Street with her husband, Mark Bennett. Mark, 45, was the coach of the local high school basketball team. The couple had been married for 20 years and celebrated their anniversary just a week before Laura's death. They had no children but were very close to their nieces and nephews, often hosting family gatherings at their home. Laura's family included her parents, John and Mary Turner, who lived in Cedar Rapids, and her younger sister, Jewel, who worked as a teacher. Laura and Jewel were very close, often spending weekends together shopping or watching movies. Laura's friends described her as caring and always willing to lend a hand. She was the type of person who remembered birthdays and always sent a card. On August 13, 2009, Laura spent the day at her salon, working with clients and catching up with friends. That evening, she went home to have dinner with Mark. They watched TV together, enjoying their favorite show, The Big Bang Theory. Laura was looking forward to a busy week ahead, filled with appointments at the salon and plans for the upcoming fundraiser. Laura's sudden and tragic death left the community in shock. Everyone who knew her felt a deep loss, and many wondered who could have wanted to harm such a kind and caring person. On August 14, 2009, at 8:00 a.m., it was a bright and sunny morning in Waterloo, Iowa. Mark Bennett, Laura's husband, woke up and went downstairs. As he entered the living room, he saw Laura lying on the couch. At first, he thought she was just sleeping, but something didn't seem right. She wasn't moving and looked very pale. Mark's heart raced as he walked closer and tried to wake her up. When she didn't respond, he panicked and grabbed the phone to call 911. His voice was shaky and full of fear as he spoke to the operator.
My wife, she won't wake up. I think something's wrong. Please, send help.
Sir, can you tell me your address?
Please hurry.
The operator assured him that help was on the way and instructed him to check if Laura was breathing. Mark followed the instructions, but there was no sign of life. He felt helpless and scared as he waited for the paramedics to arrive. Within minutes, an ambulance pulled up to the Bennett home, followed by a police car. The paramedics rushed in and quickly assessed Laura's condition. Unfortunately, it was too late. Laura was pronounced dead at the scene. The paramedics tried to comfort Mark, who was in shock and couldn't believe what was happening. News of Laura's death spread quickly through the small town. Neighbors gathered outside the Bennett home, whispering and speculating about what could have happened. Laura was well known and loved in the community, and her sudden death left everyone in shock. Laura's body was taken to the medical examiner for an autopsy to determine the cause of death. As the day went on, the reality of the situation began to sink in for Mark and the community. A beloved member of their town was gone, and everyone wanted answers. The Waterloo Police Department arrived quickly at the Bennett home on August 14, 2009. It was a sunny morning, and the usually quiet Maple Street was now filled with the flashing lights of police cars and an ambulance. Detective Sarah Collins Miller and Detective Jojo Roberts, both well respected in the community, led the investigation. Detective Miller was known for her keen attention to detail, while Detective Roberts was praised for his methodical approach. As they entered the house, they were struck by how peaceful everything looked. Laura Bennett was found lying on the couch in the living room. There were no signs of a struggle, and nothing appeared out of place. Laura looked as if she had simply fallen asleep, but the detectives knew something much more sinister had occurred. The detectives began their investigation by speaking with Mark Bennett, Laura's husband. He was visibly distraught and still in shock from finding his wife that morning. Mark explained that Laura had seemed fine the night before, and he couldn't understand what had happened. The detectives took note of his calm yet detached demeanor, making sure to record his every word. Next, the detectives examined the crime scene. The living room was tidy, with Laura's favorite magazines, like People and Better Homes and Gardens, a highbrow magazine by Iowa standards, neatly stacked on the coffee table. A cup of tea sat untouched next to a partially finished crossword puzzle from the local newspaper, the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. Detective Miller noticed a faint, unusual odor in the room, which she later identified as coming from Laura's teacup. The police called in a forensic team to collect samples and gather evidence. They carefully bagged the teacup and its contents, hoping to find clues about what had caused Laura's sudden death. Detective Roberts directed the team to check for any fingerprints or traces of foreign substances in the room. They also searched the house for any signs of forced entry, but found none, suggesting that Laura knew her killer. Based on the initial findings, the detectives suspected poisoning but needed confirmation. Further examination revealed the cause of death: poisoning by aconitine, a potent toxin derived from the aconite plant, which induced cardiac arrest. As the investigation progressed, the detectives used various tools to gather more information. They interviewed neighbors and friends, reviewed Laura's recent activities, and checked her phone and email records. Each piece of evidence was carefully logged and analyzed. Detective Miller and Detective Roberts knew they had a challenging case ahead of them. Laura's death was a mystery, but they were determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to the Bennett family and the community of Waterloo. The first suspect the police focused on was Mark Bennett, Laura's 45-year-old husband. Mark, a high school basketball coach, was known for his reserved and meticulous nature. Recently, Mark had been acting distant and stressed, which raised suspicions about his involvement in Laura's death. His calm but detached demeanor during the initial questioning had also been noted by the detectives. Detective Sarah Collins Miller and Detective Jojo Roberts brought Mark in for further questioning at the Waterloo Police Department. The interrogation room was small, with gray walls and a single table with chairs. The atmosphere was tense as the detectives began their questions.
Mark, we need you to tell us about your relationship with Laura.
We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but I loved her. She was everything to me.
Recently, did you notice any changes in Laura's behavior or health?
No, she seemed fine. Busy with her salon and planning that fundraiser.
The detectives then asked about the night before Laura's death. Mark explained that they had dinner together and watched their favorite TV shows, including The Big Bang Theory, American #1 show at the time. He said they went to bed around 10 p.m. and everything seemed normal. But Mark's stress and distant behavior in the weeks leading up to Laura's death couldn't be ignored.
Mark, we found out that Laura had a large life insurance policy. Can you explain that?
Yes, We got the policy a few years ago. It was just to be safe. We never thought we'd need it.
The detectives noted his response but needed more. They pressed him further about his recent stress. Mark admitted that work had been overwhelming, but he denied any involvement in Laura's death. His calm demeanor began to crack as the questioning continued. Despite his emotional response, the detectives knew they had to keep all possibilities open. Mark had a possible motive with the life insurance money, and his recent behavior raised red flags. They decided to follow up with more interviews and background checks on Mark's activities and relationships. Mark was allowed to go home but remained under close watch. The detectives were determined to find out if his reserved exterior hid a darker side, or if he was just a grieving husband caught in a nightmare. The investigation into Laura Bennett's death took a startling turn when suspicion fell on Bobby Lynette, an 18-year-old senior at Waterloo High School. Bobby, known for his outgoing personality and athletic prowess, was a close friend and personal trainer to Laura. However, rumors swirled about a possible sexual relationship between Bobby and Laura's husband, Mark Bennett, who was also his basketball coach, adding a layer of complexity to the case. Detective Collins Miller, leading the investigation, interviewed Bobby at the local police station. Bobby, dressed in his high school football jersey, appeared nervous but cooperative. He denied any involvement in Laura's death and expressed shock and sadness at the news. However, his body language betrayed his unease, and Detective Collins Miller sensed there was more to his story. To gather more information, Detective Collins Miller spoke with Laura's friends and acquaintances. They revealed that Laura and Bobby spent a lot of time together, both at the gym and socializing outside of training sessions. Some even mentioned seeing them together at local events, such as the August Festival held at Lincoln Park. The local media picked up on the story, spreading lurid stories about the nature of Bobby's relationship with Laura and his possible motives. The small town of Waterloo buzzed with gossip, with everyone eager to learn more about the young man at the center of the investigation. As the investigation continued, Detective Miller delved deeper into Bobby's background. She discovered that Bobby had a troubled family history, with his parents going through a messy divorce earlier that year. His friends described him as impulsive and hot-headed, prone to outbursts of anger. During further questioning, Bobby's demeanor changed. He became defensive and agitated, insisting that he had nothing to do with Laura's death. However, his inconsistent statements and evasive answers only raised more suspicion. Detective Miller knew she had to tread carefully. With Bobby's popularity in the community as a football and basketball star and the lack of concrete evidence linking him to the crime, building a case against him would be extremely challenging. But she was determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Laura and her grieving family. As the sun set on Waterloo in August of 2009, the investigation into Laura Bennett's death continued, with Bobby Lynette at the center of the storm. In the midst of the investigation into Laura Bennett's tragic death, a new piece of evidence emerged, casting a shadow of doubt over the case. On a bright August morning in Waterloo, Iowa, a neighbor stumbled upon a torn piece of paper while taking out the trash. The paper, partially soaked from recent rainfall, turned out to be a torn fragment of a love letter. It was addressed to Mark Bennett, Laura's husband, and signed by David Reynolds, a local florist. The discovery of the torn letter sent shockwaves through the community and breathed new life into the investigation. Detective Sarah Collins Miller, leading the case, wasted no time in analyzing the letter. Despite its partial state that the content hinted at a long-term sexual relationship between Mark and David, adding a layer of complexity to the already intricate web of suspects and motives. Meanwhile, forensic experts meticulously examined the torn letter for fingerprints and DNA evidence. Every detail, no matter how small, was scrutinized in the quest for answers. The letter, now a crucial piece of evidence, held the potential to unravel the mystery surrounding Laura's death and bring her killer to justice. As the investigation unfolded, tensions rose in Waterloo. Residents anxiously awaited updates on the case, hoping for closure and justice for Laura and her grieving family. Detective Collins Miller remained focused and determined, her unwavering commitment to the truth driving her forward in the pursuit of justice. David Reynolds, a 27-year-old florist, became the third suspect in Laura Bennett's mysterious death. David was known around Waterloo for his friendly personality and his flower shop, David's Blossoms, which he had run for 5 years. His secret romance with Mark Bennett had started 10 years ago, when David was a high school student and Mark was his basketball coach. This revelation shocked the quiet conservative community. Adding fuel to the already hot fire, David had an argument with Laura a week before her death. Neighbors reported hearing loud voices and seeing Laura leave David's shop looking upset. This argument, coupled with David's intense emotions towards Mark, raised suspicions. On August 19, 2009, David was brought in for questioning at the Waterloo Police Department. During the interrogation, David was nervous and shaky. Detective Collins Miller asked him about his relationship with Mark and the argument with Laura. David admitted to the affair but denied any involvement in Laura's death.
I loved Mark, but I would never hurt Laura. She didn't deserve this.
What about the argument you two had?
Laura found out about the affair and confronted me. She was angry, but I promised her I would end it with Mark. I didn't want to cause any more pain.
David's emotional state and conflicting statements made him appear suspicious. He struggled to keep his story straight, especially when asked about his whereabouts on the night of Laura's death. He claimed he was at home, alone, watching The Big Bang Theory, something no one could verify. The investigation into David's past also revealed a pattern of obsessive behavior. Former friends described him as intensely focused on his relationships, sometimes to an unhealthy degree. This information, along with his nervous demeanor during questioning, made Detective Collins believe he could be capable of something drastic. The police continued to gather evidence, checking David's phone records and looking for any signs of a chemotine, the poison used to kill Laura, in his shop or home. The investigation was far from over, and David remained under close scrutiny. On August 21, 2009, the Waterloo Police Department had a major breakthrough in Laura Bennett's case. The police discovered that Bobby Lynette, the 18-year-old high school student, basketball and football star, personal trainer, close friend of Laura, and alleged lover of her husband, Mark, had purchased aconite from an online vendor a few weeks before Laura's death. This crucial piece of evidence pointed directly to Bobby as the person who poisoned Laura. Detective Sarah Collins Miller and her team traced Bobby's online purchase history and found the receipt for the aconite. When they confronted Bobby with this evidence, he broke down and confessed to the crime. He admitted that he had poisoned Laura, hoping to eliminate her and David Reynolds, Mark's other lover, thus having Mark Bennett all to himself. Bobby's plan included using a rare plant toxin to frame David, a florist, for the murder. On the day of Bobby's arrest, it was a stormy evening. The sky was dark, and rain poured heavily as the police surrounded Bobby's home. Bobby was taken into custody without any resistance. Surprisingly, he appeared calm and seemed resigned to his fate. During his confession, Bobby revealed details of his meticulous plan. He explained how he had researched various poisons and decided on aconite because it was hard to detect and would cause cardiac arrest. Bobby said he had slipped the poison into Laura's tea on the morning of her death. He hoped that the evidence would lead the police to suspect David Reynolds due to the heated argument he had with Laura the week before. Mark Bennett, Laura's husband, was deeply involved in the case as well. He told police that he had been using Bobby to divert suspicion from his own affair with David Reynolds. He had known about Bobby's feelings for him and manipulated Bobby's emotions to keep the affair secret. As the truth came out, the small town of Waterloo was shocked. Laura's family and friends were devastated by the betrayal and the loss of such a beloved member of their community. However, they were also relieved that justice had been served and that Laura's murderer had been caught. This tragic case of love, betrayal, and murder left a lasting impact on Waterloo. Laura Bennett's memory was honored by the community she had loved and served. Her salon, a symbol of her dedication and hard work, continued to operate under new management, ensuring her legacy lived on. The trial of Bobby Lynette began in December 2009. The case drew significant attention from the local community, with local stations covering the proceedings. The courtroom was packed with Laura Bennett's family, friends, and curious residents of Waterloo. Assistant District Attorney Jane Julie Carter, a 38-year-old known for her fierce dedication, led the prosecution. She presented the case that Bobby's actions were premeditated and driven by his obsessive love for Mark Bennett. Carter showed the jury the evidence of Bobby's purchase of aconite from an online vendor, his confession, and his detailed plan to poison Laura. On the other side, the defense attorney, Michael Reedley, a 55-year-old seasoned lawyer known for his calm demeanor, argued that Bobby was manipulated by Mark Bennett. Reedley claimed that Bobby acted out of misguided affection and was used as a pawn in Mark's plan to cover up his affair with David Reynolds. Reedley portrayed Bobby as a young man caught in a tragic situation, unable to see through Mark's manipulation. Throughout the trial, Laura's family watched with heavy hearts. They heard the details of the love triangle and the tragic events leading to Laura's death. Mark Bennett testified, denying any involvement in the planning of the murder, but his role in the affair with David and his manipulation of Bobby became clear. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On December 18, 2009, they returned with a verdict. Bobby Lynette was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge announced the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby showed little emotion as he was led away, his fate sealed. Laura's family expressed mixed emotions. They were relieved that Bobby was held accountable for his actions, but they also felt a lingering sense of injustice. Mark Bennett, despite his role in the events that led to Laura's death, faced no legal consequences. The case left a deep impact on the Waterloo community. People were shocked by the betrayal and the dark secrets that had surfaced. Laura Bennett's salon, one of only 3 in the state of Iowa, continued to operate under new management, honoring her memory and dedication to the community. The town of Waterloo, though shaken by the events, came together to support each other, hoping to heal from the tragic loss of a beloved friend and neighbor. In the aftermath of the trial, Mark Bennett and David Reynolds decided to leave Waterloo. The scandal and publicity surrounding Laura Bennett's death made it difficult for them to stay. In August 2010, they both quit their jobs. Mark as a high school basketball coach and David as a florist. They moved to Sacramento, California, hoping to start anew and escape the shadow of the tragedy. In California, Mark and David worked hard to rebuild their lives. They found new jobs, with Mark coaching at a local community center and David opening a small flower shop. Their relationship grew stronger, and they eventually got married in 2015. Together, they adopted 2 children, creating a new family and a fresh start far from the painful memories in Waterloo. Detective Sarah Collins, now divorced, continued her career with the Waterloo Police Department. Her work on the Laura Bennett case earned her a reputation for her tenacity and skill. She took on more challenging cases and became a well-respected figure in law enforcement. Her dedication to solving crimes and bringing justice to victims remained unwavering. Laura Bennett's family struggled to cope with their loss but found a way to honor her memory. They established the Laura Bennett Scholarship Fund in 2011. The scholarship was aimed at helping local high school students pursue higher education, reflecting Laura's spirit of kindness and community service. The fund received widespread support from the community, with annual fundraisers and events to keep Laura's legacy alive. The town of Waterloo slowly healed from the tragic events. While the pain of Laura's loss could never be erased, these actions helped the community find a path forward. Brianna Dalton was just 18 years old when she died. She had recently graduated from Forest Park High School, where she was known for being smart and kind. Brianna loved reading and dreamed of becoming a teacher one day. She worked part-time at Barnes & Noble, where she enjoyed recommending books to customers and talking about her favorite stories. Brianna lived in Forest Park, Ohio, with her stepfather, Irving Dalton, and his new wife, Margarita. Irving was a wealthy businessman, and Margarita was much younger than him. Brianna's own mother had passed away a year earlier, which made life harder for Brianna. She often felt lonely and missed her mom a lot. Despite these challenges, Brianna was a cheerful and creative person. Her teachers at Forest Park High School always said she was a joy to have in class. She was part of the school's drama club and loved acting in school plays. Brianna's best friends often talked about how she would light up any room with her smile and positive energy. In the days leading up to her death, Brianna was busy making plans for her future. She had just attended her graduation ceremony and was excited about starting college in the fall. She had been accepted to Ohio State University and planned to study education. Brianna was looking forward to becoming a teacher and inspiring kids to love reading as much as she did. Brianna's relationship with her stepfather, Irving, was complicated. She seemed very close to him on the surface, but recently confided in her friends about how uncomfortable she felt around him. Irving was known for being charming in public but very controlling at home. Brianna sometimes told friends how she tried to avoid being alone with him as much as possible. Brianna had a bright future ahead of her and many dreams she wanted to fulfill. Her sudden death shocked everyone who knew her, leaving a hole in the hearts of her family, friends, and the community. On the morning of May 14, 2015, at around 7:30 a.m., Margarita Dalton made a shocking discovery. She walked into her stepdaughter Brianna's bedroom and found her lying on the floor, unresponsive. Margarita, who had only been married to Brianna's stepfather, Irving, for a few months, screamed in horror. The room was a mess with clothes and books scattered everywhere, making it look like a burglary had taken place. Margarita quickly called 911, her hands shaking as she dialed. She told the operator that her stepdaughter was not breathing and that it looked like someone had broken into the house. The 911 operator tried to calm her down and instructed her to check for a pulse, but Margarita was too scared to do anything more than wait for the police and paramedics to arrive. When the emergency services arrived, they found Margarita sitting on the floor outside Brianna's room, crying and holding her head in her hands. The paramedics rushed in and quickly confirmed that Brianna was dead. They noted that she had been strangled with a bra, which was found near her body. There were also signs of a struggle, with furniture overturned and items thrown around the room. Officer Jake Martinez was the first police officer on the scene. He immediately secured the area and started taking statements from Margarita. She was in shock, her voice trembling as she described how she had found Brianna. Margarita said she had been making breakfast when she realized Brianna had not come down yet. When she went to check on her, she found the terrible scene. As the news of Brianna's death spread, the local community was in shock. Friends and neighbors gathered outside the Dalton house, whispering in disbelief. The local news stations, like El Valde Channel 5, quickly picked up the story, and soon, everyone in Forest Park knew about the tragic death of Brianna Dalton. The police arrived quickly at the Dalton house on the morning of May 14, 2015. Led by Detectives Ned and Luster and James Reed, the team wasted no time in securing the area and beginning their investigation. Both detectives were well known in Forest Park for their dedication and thoroughness. Detective Luster, calm and analytical, led the team with precision. Detective Reed, although emotional at the sight of Brianna's body, focused on gathering evidence. Brianna's bedroom was a chaotic scene. Clothes, books, and other items were scattered everywhere, indicating a struggle. The bed was unmade, and the furniture was overturned. Brianna lay on the floor, and it was clear she had been strangled with a bra, which was found near her body. The detectives noted the signs of a staged burglary, meant to cover up the true nature of the crime. The detectives began their work by photographing the entire room and documenting the evidence. They collected fingerprints from the furniture, door handles, and windows. They also took samples of fibers found on Brianna's body and clothing. Forensic experts were called in to assist, using advanced tools like luminol to detect any blood traces that were not visible to the naked eye. Detective Luster interviewed Margarita Dalton, who had found Brianna's body. Margarita was still in shock, her voice shaky as she recounted the events of the morning. She explained that she had gone to check on Brianna when she didn't come down for breakfast. Margarita said she and Irving had gone to bed around 11 p.m. and hadn't heard anything unusual. The detectives also spoke with Irving Dalton. He was calm but defensive, insisting he had been at a business meeting the night before and knew nothing about the crime. He claimed he had come home late and went straight to bed. Irving's demeanor raised suspicions, but the detectives knew they needed more evidence to confirm their theories. Outside, the community was reeling from the news. Neighbors gathered, watching as the police went in and out of the house. The local media, including WLWT Channel 5, reported on the crime, adding pressure on the police to solve the case quickly. As the day went on, the detectives continued to gather evidence. They took Brianna's phone and computer for analysis, hoping to find clues about her activities and interactions in the days leading up to her death. They also planned to review security footage from nearby homes and businesses to see if anyone had been near the Dalton house the previous night. The crime scene investigation was just the beginning of a complex and heartbreaking case that would leave a lasting impact on the Forest Park community. Irving Dalton, 58, was the first suspect the police investigated. He was a wealthy businessman known in Forest Park for his success in real estate. Irving was a tall, imposing figure who often wore expensive suits and drove luxury cars. Despite his public charm, many people described him as controlling and manipulative at home. Irving had married Brianna's mother when Brianna was just a child. After her mother's death, Irving became her legal guardian. Their relationship was strained at times and affectionate at others, but recently Brianna confided in her friends about her unease around him. There were even whispers about a romantic relationship between Irving and Brianna, which made him a key suspect in the investigation. Detective Luster and Detective Reed brought Irving in for questioning at the Forest Park Police Department. During the interrogation, Irving maintained a calm and collected demeanor. He told the detectives that he had been at a business meeting the night of Brianna's death and came home late. Irving said he went straight to bed and didn't hear or see anything unusual. The detectives pressed Irving on his relationship with Brianna. He admitted they didn't get along well but denied any wrongdoing. Irving claimed he was strict with Brianna because he wanted the best for her. Despite his composed appearance, the detectives sensed that Irving was hiding something. To understand Irving better, the police interviewed his colleagues and acquaintances. Many described him as a man who liked to be in control. His business partners mentioned that Irving could be very persuasive and often got his way in deals. However, no one had any concrete evidence linking him to Brianna's death. Irving's possible motive for harming Brianna came from the rumors about their romantic relationship. If these rumors were true, Irving might have felt threatened by the possibility of Brianna revealing his actions. This could have led him to take drastic measures to silence her. Despite his calm responses during interrogation, Irving's behavior raised suspicions. He was very careful with his answers, and the detectives noticed he avoided making direct eye contact. They also found it odd that Irving didn't show much emotion about Brianna's death, which struck them as unusual for a stepfather. The detectives decided to dig deeper into Irving's alibi. They checked with his business associates to confirm his whereabouts on the night of the murder. While his colleagues confirmed he was at the meeting, there was still a window of time unaccounted for, which kept the detectives suspicious of Irving. Irving's controlled demeanor, the strained relationship with Brianna, and the rumors about his behavior all pointed to him as a significant suspect. The police knew they needed more evidence to build a stronger case against him, so they continued their investigation. Margarita Dalton, 23, was the next suspect the police investigated. She had married Irving Dalton shortly after Brianna's mother passed away. Margarita had worked as a waitress at Hooters before marrying Irving, and many people saw her as a gold digger. However, those close to her knew she genuinely cared for Irving, despite the power imbalance in their relationship. Margarita was a young and naive woman who often seemed out of place in Irving's wealthy world. She was insecure and anxious, aware of the whispers about her motivations. Despite her attempts to build a relationship with Brianna, the teenager kept her distance, making Margarita's life in the Dalton household lonely and challenging. Detectives Luster and Reed brought Margarita in for questioning. During the interrogation, Margarita was visibly distressed, her eyes red from crying. She told the detectives she had found Brianna's body that morning and had immediately called 911. Margarita explained that she had been making breakfast when she realized Brianna hadn't come downstairs, prompting her to check on the teenager. Margarita described her relationship with Brianna as difficult. She admitted that Brianna never warmed up to her and often ignored her attempts to bond. Margarita said she had tried to be a good stepmother but felt like she was always failing. Despite this, she insisted she had nothing to do with Brianna's death. The detectives asked Margarita about the night of the murder. Margarita said she and Irving had gone to bed around 11 p.m. She claimed they didn't hear anything unusual during the night. Margarita's alibi seemed straightforward, but the detectives needed to verify it. To understand Margarita better, the police spoke with her friends and former coworkers. They described her as sweet but easily influenced. Margarita's friends mentioned that she often felt overwhelmed by her new life with Irving and struggled to fit in. However, no one believed she was capable of harming Brianna. The detectives considered Margarita's possible motive. Given her young age and fragile state, they wondered if Margarita might have felt threatened by Brianna or if she had acted out of jealousy. However, Margarita's genuine distress during questioning made the detectives doubt this theory. Despite her emotional responses, the police had to explore every possibility. They checked Margarita's phone records and looked for any signs of conflict between her and Brianna. They also reviewed security footage from the Dalton house and nearby areas to see if Margarita's account of the night matched up. Margarita's clear distress and consistent story made the detectives question her involvement in Brianna's death. However, they knew they had to continue their investigation thoroughly, ensuring no stone was left unturned in their search for the truth. Vance Staltz, 26, was Brianna's boyfriend and the third suspect the police investigated. Vance had a troubled past, including a history of drug addiction. He worked on and off as a mechanic, but often struggled to keep a job due to his erratic behavior. Despite his issues, Brianna had seen something in Vance and tried to help him turn his life around. Vance lived in a small RV on the outskirts of Forest Park. He was known to be passionate but also volatile, and his relationship with Brianna had its ups and downs. Friends described their relationship as intense, with both deep affection and frequent arguments. Detectives Luster and Reed brought Vance in for questioning. During the interrogation, Vance appeared nervous and agitated. He fidgeted in his chair and avoided making eye contact. When asked about the night of Brianna's murder, Vance said he had been at home watching old replays of Days of Our Lives and had fallen asleep early. He claimed he had not seen Brianna for a few days before her death. The detectives pressed Vance about his relationship with Brianna. Vance admitted they had argued recently about his drug use, but he insisted he would never hurt her. He became emotional, repeatedly saying he loved Brianna and wanted to get clean for her. Despite his passionate responses, the detectives noticed inconsistencies in his story. To gather more information, the police spoke with Vance's neighbors. They mentioned hearing loud noises and shouting coming from his apartment on the night of the murder. One neighbor said she saw Vance leave his apartment around midnight and didn't see him return until the early hours of the morning. The detectives also reviewed Vance's phone records. They found several missed calls and text messages from Brianna on the night of her murder. The messages showed that Brianna was worried about Vance and wanted to check on him. This contradicted Vance's statement that he had not seen or heard from Brianna for days. The possible motive for Vance was his unstable relationship with Brianna and his struggle with addiction. The detectives considered that Vance might have acted out of jealousy or anger during an argument. However, without concrete evidence linking him directly to the crime, they couldn't arrest him yet. The detectives decided to search Vance's apartment. They found some suspicious items, including a torn piece of fabric that matched the material of Brianna's shirt. They also discovered drug paraphernalia, indicating Vance had been using drugs recently. Although Vance's behavior and the evidence found raised suspicions, the detectives knew they needed more to make a solid case. They continued to investigate, hoping to uncover the truth about Brianna's tragic death and bring her killer to justice. On May 16, 2015, 2 days after Brianna's death, new evidence came to light. It was a rainy Saturday morning, and Detective Luster received a call from a local resident named Greg who lived a few houses down from the Daltons, said he had found something suspicious in his backyard. Detective Luster and Detective Reed quickly drove to his house. He was waiting for them on his porch, holding an old worn-out shoe. He explained that he had found the shoe near his garbage bins that morning. The shoe looked out of place, and Greg thought it might be connected to the recent crime. The detectives took the shoe back to the station for further examination. They also asked Greg if he had seen anyone near his house on the night of the murder. Greg said he had been away on a business trip and had only returned that morning. He hadn't noticed anything unusual before he left. At the station, forensic experts examined the shoe. They found traces of mud and grass, which suggested it had been worn recently. More importantly, they discovered a small blood stain on the inside of the shoe. The shoe was a men's size 11, which matched the size of shoes Irving Dalton wore. The detectives also checked the shoe against the list of items taken from Brianna's room. They found that it didn't belong to anyone in the Dalton household, raising more questions about its origin. Excited by this breakthrough, the detectives decided to search the area around Greg's house more thoroughly. They hoped to find more clues that could lead them to the killer. As they combed through the neighborhood, they discovered a hidden path that led from Greg's backyard to the Daltons' house. The path was overgrown with weeds and hardly noticeable, but it could have been used by someone trying to avoid being seen. The detectives also reviewed the security footage from nearby houses again, focusing on the area around Greg's house. They noticed a shadowy figure moving along the path late at night, just hours before Brianna's body was found. The footage was grainy, but it was clear enough to show that someone had used the path recently. This new evidence gave the detectives a fresh lead. They decided to re-interview Irving Dalton, pressing him about the shoe and the hidden path. Irving continued to deny any involvement, but the detectives felt they were getting closer to uncovering the truth. With the discovery of the shoe and the hidden path, the investigation took a significant turn. The detectives were now more determined than ever to find Brianna's killer and bring justice to her grieving family and friends. On May 20, 2015, the breakthrough in Brianna Dalton's case came from an unexpected source. Detectives Luster and Reed received a call from the forensic lab. The blood stain found on the shoe matched Irving Dalton's DNA. This discovery was the crucial piece of evidence they needed. Irving Dalton, 58, was a wealthy real estate businessman known for his charm in public and his controlling nature in private. He had married Brianna's mother when Brianna was a child and became her legal guardian after her mother's death. Despite his public persona, whispers about his inappropriate behavior towards Brianna had persisted. Irving had killed Brianna to hide the fact that she was pregnant with his baby, a result of their secret affair. He feared the scandal and the potential legal repercussions would ruin his reputation and destroy his marriage to Margarita. On the night of May 13, 2015, Irving went to Brianna's room to confront her. The confrontation turned violent, and he strangled her with a bra. He then staged the scene to look like a burglary gone wrong. Armed with the new evidence, the detectives planned Irving's arrest carefully. On the morning of May 21, 2015, at 7:00 a.m., they arrived at the Dalton house. Irving answered the door, surprised to see the police. Detective Luster informed him he was under arrest for the murder of Brianna Dalton. Irving tried to remain calm, but his hands shook as they cuffed him and read him his rights. Irving's reaction to his arrest was a mix of shock and resignation. He didn't resist, but kept insisting he was innocent. However, the evidence was overwhelming. The shoe with his blood, the hidden path leading from Greg Thompson's yard to the Dalton house, and the inconsistencies in his alibi all pointed to his guilt. As the news of Irving's arrest spread, Brianna's friends and family were both relieved and devastated. Margarita was in disbelief, struggling to come to terms with the fact that her husband was a murderer. Brianna's friends expressed a mix of sorrow and anger, mourning the loss of their kind-hearted friend and the betrayal by someone who was supposed to protect her. The local community in Forest Park was shaken by the revelations. News outlets like WLWT Channel 5 covered the story extensively, and the case became a talking point on social media. People were shocked that someone so respected could commit such a heinous act. The arrest of Irving Dalton brought a sense of closure to the case, but it was clear that the road to justice for Brianna was just beginning. The detectives knew the trial would be a long and difficult process, but they were determined to see it through and ensure that Brianna's killer was held accountable. The trial of Irving Dalton began on August 10, 2015, drawing significant attention from the local community and media. The courtroom was packed with reporters from WLWT Channel 5 and other news outlets. Brianna's friends and family were present, hoping for justice. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Cole Era, a determined and experienced lawyer in his early 40s. Era presented a compelling case against Irving. He detailed the evidence, including the shoe with Irving's blood, the hidden path, and the inconsistencies in Irving's alibi. Era argued that Irving killed Brianna to hide the fact that she was pregnant with his baby, fearing the scandal would ruin his reputation and marriage. The defense attorney, Militia Bean Turner, was a skilled and persuasive lawyer in her late 30s. Turner argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Irving was being unfairly targeted. She suggested that someone else, like Vance Staltz, Brianna's troubled boyfriend, could have committed the crime. Turner emphasized Irving's reputation and success as a businessman, portraying him as a victim of false accusations. As the trial progressed, the emotional toll on Brianna's family and friends was evident. They listened to the details of her death and Irving's betrayal, struggling to hold back tears. Margarita Dalton, Irving's young wife, was a constant presence in the courtroom, looking pale and distraught. On December 5, 2015, after weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury reached a verdict. The courtroom was tense as the foreman read the decision. Guilty of first-degree murder, Irving showed little reaction, maintaining his stoic demeanor, while Brianna's family and friends expressed a mixture of relief and sorrow. The sentencing phase followed, and on December 12, 2015, the judge handed down a life sentence without the possibility of parole. District Attorney Era called the sentence just and necessary for the heinous crime Irving committed. Defense Attorney Turner expressed disappointment but respected the jury's decision. The verdict and sentencing had a profound impact on everyone involved. Brianna's family felt a sense of justice but also deep grief over their loss. Margarita Dalton was devastated, struggling to rebuild her life after discovering her husband's dark secret. Vance Staltz, who had been a suspect, was relieved to be cleared but remained haunted by Brianna's death. The Forest Park community also felt the effects of the trial. People were shocked that someone as respected as Irving could commit such a crime. The case sparked conversations about trust, betrayal, and the importance of looking out for one another. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a long and painful journey for those who loved Brianna. While justice had been served, the memory of Brianna Dalton would always be a reminder of the tragic events that unfolded in May 2015. After the trial of Irving Dalton, life in Forest Park slowly began to return to normal, though the scars left by Brianna Dalton's tragic death would linger for years to come. For Brianna's family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, yet their grief remained palpable. Brianna's mother, who had passed away years before, was remembered fondly by neighbors who attended a memorial service at the local church. The family held a small gathering afterward, where they shared stories and memories of Brianna. Margarita Dalton, who had stood by Irving throughout the trial, struggled to come to terms with the reality of her husband's actions. She sought solace in her friends and church community, finding strength in their support. Over time, Margarita began to rebuild her life, though she remained haunted by the betrayal she had endured. Vance Staltz, Brianna's boyfriend and briefly a suspect in the case, faced his own challenges. He entered rehab shortly after the trial, determined to overcome his addiction and honor Brianna's memory. With the support of his family and friends, Vance made progress, taking steps toward a healthier, more stable life. In May 2016, a year after Brianna's death, the community gathered at Forest Park High School for a memorial service. Friends, neighbors, and classmates shared memories of Brianna, lighting candles in her honor. The ceremony provided comfort to those who had known Brianna and served as a reminder of the importance of cherishing loved ones. As time passed, Brianna Dalton's story faded from the headlines, replaced by new events and challenges facing the world in 2015. Yet for those who had known her, Brianna's kindness, creativity, and dreams of becoming a teacher remain vivid memories, a legacy that would endure. Derek Orville, 45, was a well-known and successful realtor from Mankato, Minnesota, a town more famous for its cornfields and conservative values than for the kind of thrill-seeking that Derek openly craved. Outwardly, Derek was the perfect image of a charismatic, outgoing man who seemed to have it all. His confidence and charm made him a popular figure in his community, and his real estate business was thriving. He was known for his love of adventure and excitement, always the first to suggest a daring activity or exotic vacation. Derek's love for life's thrills, including those of a sexual kind, extended beyond his career and into his personal life, where he sought out experiences that pushed boundaries. This desire for excitement led Derek and his wife, Janice, to book a trip on an adults-only cruise through the Caribbean in April of 2015. This cruise, marketed as an exotic getaway for couples seeking to spice up their relationships, promised a week of sun, sea, and illicit sex. Derek saw it as the perfect opportunity to explore the more daring side of his sexual interests. Despite his adventurous nature, Derek's life wasn't without its darker sides. Friends described him as someone who could be controlling, particularly in his relationships. This side of Derek had surfaced more often in recent years, straining his marriage to Janice, a quiet and somewhat meek woman. Yet Derek remained determined to revive the spark in their relationship through illicit sexual practices such as swinging and wife swapping, believing that this cruise could be the answer to his marital problems. In the days leading up to their departure, Derek tried to force Janice to go on the cruise with him, in the belief that this trip would bring them closer together. He painted a picture of excitement and intimacy that he hoped would rekindle their romance. But behind his confident exterior, Derek was unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface of his marriage. As the cruise approached, Derek's dreams were filled with visions of adventure and passion. He was ready to dive into the experience, never imagining that it would be the last adventure of his life. On the morning of April 14, 2015, at approximately 9 o'clock a.m., a housekeeper aboard the luxurious cruise ship made a grisly discovery. Her name was Luisa Palacio Ortiz, a 32-year-old woman from San Juan, Puerto Rico, who had been working on the ship for nearly 5 years. As she went about her usual routine, cleaning the cabins while most passengers were at breakfast, she approached cabin 827, the suite assigned to Derek and Janice Orville. When Luisa knocked on the door and received no answer, she assumed the couple had gone out for the day. Using her master key, she entered the room to begin her cleaning. Almost immediately, Luisa noticed something was wrong. The room was eerily quiet, and a strange, heavy smell lingered in the air. As she stepped further into the cabin, Luisa's eyes were drawn to the bed, where she saw Derek Orville's body. He was naked, lying face down on the bed, the mouth gagged and his hands bound to the bedpost with metal chains. A pillow was pressed tightly over his face, and there were no signs of movement. Shocked, Luisa froze for a moment, trying to process what she was seeing. Her heart raced and she felt a wave of nausea. But years of working on the ship had taught her to stay calm in emergencies. Quickly, she backed out screaming of the room and ran down the hallway to the nearest phone. She dialed the ship's emergency number and reported what she had found. Within minutes, ship security arrived at the scene, and the area was cordoned off to prevent any passengers from entering. Luisa, visibly shaken, was taken to a private area where she was given water and comforted by a fellow crew member. She later told investigators that she had never seen anything like this before and hoped never to see it again. The discovery of Derek's body sent shockwaves through the ship. Spicy gossip spread quickly among the passengers, who had been enjoying a sunny day at sea, completely unaware of the dark turn the cruise had taken. Many gathered in small groups, whispering about what had happened, as the ship's crew and authorities prepared to handle the unfolding tragedy. Within an hour of the discovery, the ship's captain, Reynolds, had alerted the local authorities at the nearest port, St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. By 10:30 a.m. on April 14, 2015, a team of detectives from the Virgin Islands Police Department, led by Detective Samuel Torres, boarded the cruise ship. Torres, a seasoned investigator known for his sharp instincts and methodical approach, was accompanied by a forensic specialist and her assistant. The team moved quickly to secure the crime scene, taking every precaution to ensure that no evidence was contaminated. As Torres entered cabin 827, he was struck by the stark contrast between the luxury of the room and the brutal reality of the crime. The cabin, with its plush bedding, elegant furniture, and ocean views, was immaculately clean, too clean. The air was heavy with the scent of cleaning products, which suggested that the scene had been deliberately sanitized. Derek Orville's naked body lay undisturbed on the bed, still bound with metal chains and gagged with a ball, a pillow pressed tightly against his nose. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, and no obvious fingerprints, indicating that the killer had taken great care in covering their tracks. The medical examiner immediately began her examination of the body, noting the ligature marks on Derek's wrists and ankles. The chains were heavy and industrial-looking, not something typically found on a cruise ship, raising suspicions that they have been brought on board specifically for this possibly sexual purpose. They also observed that Derek's lips were tinged blue, a clear sign of suffocation. The time of death was estimated to be around 2:00 a.m., based on the body's rigidity and temperature. Meanwhile, Torres meticulously searched the room for any additional clues. They used luminol to check for traces of blood, but the tests came back negative, further supporting the theory that the scene had been carefully cleaned. Torres also ordered a sweep of the cabin for any hair, fibers, or other forensic evidence that might have been overlooked. The detectives were puzzled by the lack of any clear evidence pointing to a suspect. Everything about the scene suggested a premeditated, calculated murder by someone who knew Derek's preferences and tendencies. As the investigation continued, the crew and passengers were questioned. Ship logs were reviewed to identify anyone who might have entered or exited the cabin during the night. But the initial search yielded few leads, leaving the detectives with more questions than answers. The team realized they were dealing with a highly skilled and possibly cold-blooded killer. The first person Detective Samuel Torres focused on was Janice Orville, Derek's wife of 20 years. Janice, 45, was a quiet, unassuming librarian from Mankato, Minnesota. She had always been the opposite of her outgoing husband. Where Derek was adventurous and charismatic, Janice was reserved and meek. Her friends described her as a kind but somewhat timid woman who often felt overpowered by Derek's larger-than-life personality. She had spent most of her life supporting Derek's ambitions, including his desire to sexually experiment with this adults-only cruise. When Torres brought Janice in for questioning on the afternoon of April 14, she appeared visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. Janice was cooperative, but her demeanor was that of a woman who had been pushed to the brink. As she recounted the events of the previous night, her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. She told Torres that Derek had been excited about the cruise, particularly about exploring their sexual relationship in new ways, something that had always made her uncomfortable. Janice admitted that she had reluctantly agreed to participate in Derek's wife-swapping fantasy, hoping it would satisfy her husband's increasingly kinky sexual needs. But as the days went on, Janice, already off-kilter, having never even seen the ocean in her life, became increasingly uneasy with her husband's sexual arrangements. She described feeling trapped by Derek's insatiable appetite for bizarre sexual situations and disgusted by the situations he practically forced her into. The night before Derek's death, the couple had argued in their cabin. Janice told Torres that Derek had demanded her to have sex with Marina Davis-Lockley, one of the other participants in the wife-swapping arrangement, while he watched. Janice had refused, leading to a heated argument. She admitted to feeling both angry and humiliated, but she insisted that she had left the cabin to cool off, spending the night walking around the ship's deck, staring out at the ocean and praying for strength. Torres pressed Janice on the details of the argument, trying to determine if her anger could have driven her to kill Derek. However, Janice remained calm and composed, showing no signs of the rage that might have led to such a brutal murder. Despite her discomfort with the situation, Janice maintained that she would never have harmed Derek, whom she had loved for so many years. The detectives noted her demeanor, but they couldn't ignore the potential motive, a combination of fear, resentment, and desperation that made Janice a key suspect. The second suspect in Derek Orville's murder was Brian Davis, a 47-year-old investment banker from Long Island, New York. Brian was everything Derek admired: successful, confident, and charismatic, with a reputation as a ladies' man. He had been married to Marina Davis Lockley, a serene British yoga instructor, for 10 years, but their relationship was anything but traditional. Ryan and Marina were in an open marriage, a fact they were open about, particularly during this adults-only cruise. Ryan's involvement in the wife-swapping arrangement had started as a thrill-seeking adventure, something he was always up for. Friends described him as a smooth talker who could charm anyone into doing almost anything. On a cruise, Brian quickly bonded with Derek, who shared his enthusiasm for pushing sexual boundaries. The two men seemed to hit it off immediately, and by the third day of the trip, they had agreed to swap wives. But it wasn't just Derek's wife, Janice, who caught Brian's eye. Ryan also became attracted to Derek himself, enjoying the power dynamics that Derek liked to impose, and the two regularly heading to the nearest bathroom to have sex with each other. When Detective Samuel Torres brought Brian in for questioning, Ryan was dressed in a casual polo shirt and khaki shorts, looking more like someone about to hit the golf course than a murder suspect. He was relaxed, almost too relaxed, as he spoke to Torres. Brian admitted that he and Derek had become close and had even become sexual partners. However, he denied any involvement in Derek's death. Brian claimed that the last time he saw Derek was the night before, during a tense encounter where Derek had demanded that Brian and Marina engage in a sexual act with Janice while he watched. Brian, who said he, quote, hates conflict, said the situation had become uncomfortable, and he had left the cabin with Marina, returning to their own room for the night. Torres noticed that Brian's calm demeanor never wavered, even when the questioning became more intense. Brian spoke confidently, his answers quick and to the point. He acknowledged that the wife-swapping experience with Janice and Derek had not been what he expected, admitting that the tension between the couples had escalated as the week went on. However, he insisted that while the situation had grown awkward, he had no reason to kill Derek. Brian's alibi, spending the night with Marina in the cabin, was supported by key card records, but Torres couldn't shake the feeling that Brian was hiding something. The motive was clear: jealousy, desire, and a hunger for control. Ryan's interest in both Derek and Janice, coupled with the possibility of a love triangle turning deadly, made him a prime suspect. But without solid evidence, Torres knew he needed more to connect Brian directly to the murder. The investigation took a significant turn on April 16, 2015, 2 days after Derek Orville's body was discovered. The morning was overcast, with a light drizzle making the deck of the cruise ship slick. Detective Samuel Torres was growing frustrated. Despite the interrogations and a meticulous search of Derek's cabin, the team still hadn't uncovered any decisive evidence pointing to the killer. The crime scene was clean, and the few witnesses were either too intoxicated or too focused on their own affairs to provide useful information. But that morning, new evidence emerged that changed the direction of the investigation. A maintenance worker named Kaloy Mendez, who had been cleaning the ship's storage rooms, found a small, nondescript digital camera tucked away behind some cleaning supplies. The camera looked out of place, and its memory card was missing. Kaloy, who had heard about the murder on the ship, immediately turned it over to the ship's security team. They, in turn, passed it on to Torres and his team. The camera was a simple handheld model, the kind anyone might carry on vacation. It was slightly scuffed, suggesting it had been hastily discarded. Torres hoped the camera might contain some useful information, so he sent it to the forensic lab on board the ship for analysis. Within a few hours, the technicians had managed to recover several deleted files from the camera's internal memory. What they found was shocking. The recovered footage showed several sexual encounters between the two couples involved in the wife-swapping arrangement: Derek and Janice Orville, and Brian and Marina Davis. The videos, recorded without Janice's knowledge, revealed the increasing tension and discomfort she felt, particularly during the final night of Derek's life. One of the most disturbing clips showed a heated argument between Derek and Janice in their cabin. Derek, visibly angry, was pressuring Janice to participate in a sexual act with Marina while they watched. Janice was seen crying, pleading with Derek to stop, but he refused. The video cut off abruptly, but it was clear that Janice had been pushed to her emotional limit. This new evidence provided a much clearer picture of what might have happened that night. It also gave Torres a better understanding of Janice's state of mind in the hours leading up to the murder. The footage, combined with her earlier testimony, suggested that Janice's fear and desperation had reached a boiling point, possibly leading to Derek's death. Torres now had the motive he needed, but he still needed to confirm if Janice had actually committed the murder. The third suspect in the investigation was Marina Davis-Lockley, a 39-year-old yoga instructor from Stoke-on-Trent, England. Marina was known for her calm demeanor and spiritual outlook on life. She had met her husband, Ryan Davis, 10 years earlier while teaching a yoga class in New York City. Despite their different backgrounds, Marina being quiet and introspective, Brian being outgoing and ambitious, the couple seemed to complement each other. Their open marriage, however, was a source of curiosity and sometimes judgment from those who knew them. Marina had initially been reluctant about the wife-swapping arrangement that Brian and Derek had proposed. She wasn't as adventurous as her husband and felt uncomfortable with the idea, but she agreed to it in an effort to keep their marriage strong. As the cruise progressed, Marina found herself increasingly uneasy with the sexual dynamics between the two couples. Derek's dominant behavior, particularly his insistence on controlling the situation, clashed with Marina's desire for peace and balance. She began to distance herself from their wanton sexual activities, often retreating to the ship's yoga classes or spending time alone on the deck, staring out at the endless Caribbean Sea. Detective Samuel Torres brought Marina in for questioning after the disturbing footage from her camera was found. The videos, however, clearly showed Marina's discomfort during the sexual encounters, and Torres wanted to understand her state of mind. Marina appeared calm, but there was an undercurrent of tension in her eyes. Torres began by asking Marina about her relationship with Derek and Janice. Marina admitted that she felt sympathy for Janice, who seemed overwhelmed by Derek's controlling nature. She also expressed regret for agreeing to the wife-swapping arrangement, acknowledging that it had brought nothing but stress and anxiety. She admitted to the videos, saying that she had secretly recorded all their sexual encounters on the cruise for pragmatic reasons only. She told police she was planning to sell the footage to an adult film company as she and Brian were in deep financial trouble. When Torres pressed her about the night of Derek's murder, Marina's calm facade began to crack. She admitted that she had left Derek in Janice's cabin early, unable to bear the situation any longer. However, she denied any involvement in Derek's death. Torres noted that Marina's responses were measured but tinged with a quiet resolve. She seemed genuinely saddened by Derek's death, but also relieved that the ordeal was over. Despite her calm exterior, Torres couldn't help but wonder if Marina's desire to protect Janice had driven her to an extreme action. The possibility that Marina had acted out of a protective instinct, combined with her own discomfort, made her a serious suspect. However, without concrete evidence linking her directly to the crime, Boris knew he would have to dig deeper to find the truth. The breakthrough in the investigation came on April 18, 2015, 4 days after Derek Orville's body was found. Detective Samuel Torres had spent days reviewing the footage recovered from the hidden camera, piecing together the events leading up to Derek's murder. The evidence pointed to only one person who had the motive, opportunity, and means to carry out the crime: Janice Orville, Derek's wife. Janice, a 45-year-old librarian from Mankato, Minnesota, had been a quiet, supportive partner throughout their 20-year marriage. But the cruise had exposed the deep cracks in their relationship. Derek's domineering behavior and insistence on pushing Janice into increasingly uncomfortable sexual situations had taken a toll on her. The footage from the camera revealed Janice's growing distress, particularly during the final night of Derek's life. The video showed Derek demanding that Janice participate in a sexual act with Marina Davis while he watched, bound and gagged. Janice's tearful pleas for Derek to stop went unanswered, and the video cut off just as tensions reached a boiling point. Torres was convinced that Janice had snapped under the pressure, leading her to suffocate Derek with a pillow while he was helpless. On the morning of April 18th, Torres, along with 2 other officers, went to confront Janice in her cabin. The sun was just rising, casting a soft glow over the ship as it continued its journey through the Caribbean. Janice opened the door, her face pale and eyes red from days of sleeplessness. She knew why they were there. Torres informed Janice that she was under arrest for the murder of her husband. Janice didn't resist. Instead, she simply nodded, her hands trembling as she was handcuffed. She seemed resigned to her fate, as if the weight of the past week had finally crushed her spirit. As she was led away, other passengers watched in shocked silence, the reality of the situation sinking in. Back in Mankato, news of Janice's arrest spread quickly. The small town, where Derek had been a well-known realtor, was stunned. Friends and family struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet, unassuming librarian with the shocking crime she was accused of committing. Derek's parents were devastated. They had always seen Janice as the perfect wife for their son, and now they were grappling with the horror that she had taken his life. The arrest marked the beginning of a long legal process, but for Torres, it was the culmination of a tense and emotionally charged investigation. He had seen the toll the situation had taken on everyone involved. And while Janice's arrest brought some closure, it also left many questions about the true nature of the relationship between Derek and Janice, and how it had all gone so terribly wrong. Janice Orville's trial began on October 12, 2015, in Miami-Dade County Court. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and the families of both Derek and Janice, all eager to see justice served. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Maria Paulina Sanchez, 38, was determined to paint Janice as a cold-blooded killer. Sanchez, known for her no-nonsense approach and sharp cross-examinations, argued that Janice had meticulously planned Derek's murder as a way to escape their failing marriage. She presented the hidden camera footage as key evidence, highlighting Janice's growing distress and the final confrontation on the night of the murder. Sanchez asserted that Janice had deliberately suffocated Derek, using the pillow as the murder weapon, in a premeditated act of violence. The defense, led by public defender Ellen Goldstein, 52, painted a very different picture. Goldstein, a seasoned attorney known for his empathetic style, argued that Janice had acted in self-defense after years of psychological abuse. He described Derek as a controlling and manipulative husband who had forced Janice into humiliating situations. Goldstein claimed that Janice's actions were the result of a mental breakdown brought on by the extreme stress of the cruise and Derek's relentless pressure. Throughout the trial, Janice remained stoic, her eyes often downcast as she listened to the testimony. The Orville family sat in the front row, their grief palpable. Derek's mother, Linda Orville, broke down in tears several times, unable to comprehend how the woman she once considered a daughter could have killed her son. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning with a verdict. On October 27, 2015, Janice Orville was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought some closure to Derek's family, but it also left them with a deep sense of loss. They felt the sentence was too lenient, given the brutal nature of Derek's death. Janice's family, on the other hand, expressed relief that she had not been sentenced to life in prison, though they were devastated by the outcome. The trial had been a painful experience for everyone involved, leaving scars that would take years to heal. After the trial, the lives of everyone involved were irrevocably changed. Janice Orville began serving her 50-year sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institution, a women's prison in Ocala, Florida. Life behind bars was a harsh adjustment for Janice, who had spent most of her life in the quiet comfort of her Minnesota home. The once mousy librarian now faced a daily reality filled with strict routines, overcrowded cells, and limited contact with the outside world. She kept mostly to herself, spending her days reading and occasionally teaching other inmates how to read and write. Back in Mankato, Derek Orville's family struggled to move forward. His parents, Robert and Linda, were consumed by grief, unable to accept the loss of their only son. The house that once echoed with Derek's lively presence now felt unbearably empty. Robert, who had always been proud of Derek's achievements, became a shell of his former self, rarely leaving the house. Linda sought solace in her church community, finding comfort in prayer and the support of fellow parishioners, but the pain of losing Derek remained a constant companion. Ryan Davis and Marina Davis Lockley, the other couple involved in the wife-swapping arrangement, returned to Long Island after the trial. The scandal had destroyed their reputation and left their marriage in tatters. Brian, once a successful investment banker, lost his job after the company learned about the trial and the secret recordings he had made. Marina, who had been a respected yoga instructor, found it impossible to continue teaching, as her clients abandoned her in the wake of the scandal. The couple eventually divorced, each trying to rebuild their lives separately. For the community of Mankato, the case served as a harsh reminder of how quickly life can change. The trial and its aftermath were the talk of the town for months, as people struggled to reconcile the Janice they knew with the woman convicted of such a horrific crime. Daniel "Danny" Miller, a 45-year-old high school history teacher, was known for his engaging storytelling and unwavering dedication to his students. Residing in Springfield, Missouri, Daniel led a seemingly ordinary life. Beyond his profession, he found solace in his passion for gardening and cherished his role as a devoted father to his 2 children. His amicable nature endeared him to the community, but beneath the surface, rumors swirled about his wife's infidelities, casting a shadow over his personal life. In October 2009, the town of Springfield was abuzz with excitement as the annual Harvest Festival drew near. The streets were adorned with colorful leaves, and the crisp autumn air carried the scent of pumpkin spice. Families flocked to the local pumpkin patch to pick the perfect pumpkins for carving, while children eagerly awaited the haunted hayrides and corn mazes. Daniel Miller, being an avid gardener, was particularly fond of this time of year. He would spend his weekends tending to his lush backyard garden, carefully tilling the soil and nurturing his vibrant collection of flowers and vegetables. His garden was a sanctuary, a place where he could escape the stress of his teaching job and find solace in nature's beauty. Despite his seemingly idyllic life, whispers of trouble had begun to circulate through the town. It was rumored that Daniel's wife, Linda, had been seen in the company of other men. Gossip spread like wildfire, fueled by the small-town grapevine and the insatiable hunger for scandalous tales, and Linda soon became known as the town harlot. As the days grew shorter and the nights grew colder, tensions mounted within the Miller household. The once happy couple found themselves entangled in a web of suspicion and mistrust. Friends and neighbors noticed the strain in their relationship, but no one could have predicted the tragic turn of events that would soon unfold. In the quiet town of Springfield, Missouri, a shocking event unfolded that would send ripples through the community. On the fateful day of October 28, 2009, the sun began to set, casting an eerie glow over the neighborhood. The air was heavy with anticipation, as if the universe itself sensed something was amiss. It was Linda Miller, wife of the beloved high school history teacher Daniel Miller, who made the chilling discovery. As she entered their home, a sense of unease settled upon her. Little did she know that her life was about to be forever changed. Linda's footsteps echoed through the hallway as she made her way towards the bathroom. The door creaked open, revealing a sight that would haunt her dreams for years to come. There, sitting on the toilet, was the lifeless body of her husband, Daniel. A gasp escaped Linda's lips as she stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. How could this happen? Questions flooded her mind, but the answers remained elusive. The room was frozen in time, as if the walls themselves held their breath. The silence was deafening, broken only by Linda's anguished sobs. She reached for her phone, trembling fingers dialing the emergency number. The authorities needed to be notified, and quickly. As Linda waited for help to arrive, her mind raced with memories of happier times. She recalled Daniel's infectious laughter and his dedication to his students. How could someone so full of life meet such a tragic end? News of Daniel Miller's death spread like wildfire throughout the town. The local media buzzed with speculation, eager to uncover the truth behind this mysterious incident. Reporters from the Springfield Gazette and the Evening News arrived at the scene, cameras flashing and microphones poised. Detectives from the Springfield Police Department meticulously combed through the bathroom for any clues that could shed light on what had transpired. The room was meticulously analyzed, from the toothpaste brand on the sink to the magazines scattered on the floor. Every detail mattered in their quest for justice. As the investigation unfolded, the town of Springfield held its breath, anxiously awaiting answers. Who would want to harm Daniel Miller, a man loved and respected by all? And what secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic community? The police officers arrived at the scene with a sense of urgency, ready to uncover the truth behind the untimely demise of Daniel Miller. Leading the investigation was Detective Huey "Ducky" Hughes, a seasoned investigator known for his sharp instincts and attention to detail. Together with his team, they meticulously combed through the crime scene, leaving no stone unturned in their quest for justice. As they entered the bathroom, the officers were met with a chilling sight. The room, once a place of privacy and solace, had been transformed into a macabre scene of death. Bloodstains and a copious amount of blood stained the toilet, indicating violent, bloody, and ultimately fatal diarrhea, a stark contrast to the otherwise pristine surroundings. The officers carefully documented each bloodstain, taking photographs and making detailed notes, ensuring that no piece of evidence went unnoticed. The weapon used in this heinous crime was a lethal dose of antifreeze, cunningly mixed into Daniel's favorite evening drink, sweet iced tea. The investigators found the empty bottle of antifreeze in the kitchen, discarded among other household cleaning supplies. They meticulously collected fingerprints and DNA samples from the bottle, hoping to find a match that would lead them to the perpetrator. As they continued their search for clues, the investigators discovered a torn piece of paper on the bathroom floor. It appeared to be a note, but the words were barely legible. With the help of forensic experts, they carefully pieced together the torn fragments, revealing a cryptic message. The note mentioned a meeting with a divorce lawyer, scheduled for the day of the crime. This discovery sparked a new lead, and the investigators wasted no time in following it up. The investigation into the murder of Daniel Miller was a complex puzzle, with each piece of evidence leading the detectives closer to the truth. The meticulousness and determination of Detective Huey "Ducky" Hughes and his team would prove crucial in solving this chilling crime. In the small town of Springfield, Missouri, back in October of 2009, a shocking crime took place that left the community in disbelief. The victim, Daniel Miller, was a well-liked high school history teacher known for his captivating storytelling and dedication to his students. But behind the facade of a seemingly ordinary life, dark secrets lurked, and it was his wife, Linda Miller, who found herself at the center of the investigation. Linda, a 42-year-old ambitious real estate agent, had always been known for her charm and persuasive skills. Her career had taken off, but unfortunately, her commitment to her family had suffered as a result. Tensions had been building in the Miller household, exacerbated by Linda's habit of serving microwave meals that Daniel despised. The couple's relationship had already been strained by rumors of Linda's extramarital affairs, which had spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community. During the investigation, Linda dropped a bombshell revelation that sent shockwaves through the town. She claimed that Daniel had been having sex with his best friend, Tom Richards. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the case, leaving the police puzzled and questioning the depths of Linda's involvement. The police interrogated Linda, observing her every move and change in demeanor. At times, she appeared angry, lashing out at the investigators with frustration. Other times, she seemed calm and composed, as if she had nothing to hide. But there was something else, an underlying emotion that flickered in her eyes, leaving the investigators curious about what secrets she might be concealing. The media frenzy surrounding the case grew, with local newspapers and television stations covering every twist and turn. The town of Springfield, usually known for its blandly peaceful atmosphere, was now gripped by fear and suspicion. People whispered in hushed tones, speculating about who could be responsible for such a heinous act. As the days turned into weeks, the town of Springfield held its breath, waiting for answers. The investigation into the murder of Daniel Miller had taken a dramatic turn, and the focus now shifted to Linda Miller, the woman at the center of it all. Tom Richards, a 55-year-old mechanic with a rugged and charismatic demeanor, became the next person of interest in the investigation into the tragic demise of Daniel "Danny" Miller. As Daniel's best friend, Tom's connection to the victim raised eyebrows and suspicions among the investigators. The police delved into Tom's background, meticulously examining his every move and interaction with Daniel and Linda Miller. Tom vehemently denied any sexual involvement with Daniel, but he did admit to a tumultuous relationship with the victim. The detectives focused on the moments leading up to Daniel's death, searching for any clues that could shed light on the truth. They delved into their friendship, peeling back the layers of their bond to uncover any hidden tensions or unresolved conflicts. During the investigation, Tom's reactions ranged from anger to calmness, leaving the detectives perplexed. They carefully observed his every word and gesture, searching for any signs of guilt or deception. The investigators knew that the truth often lurked in the unspoken secrets and hidden emotions that lay beneath the surface. As the detectives dug deeper, they discovered that Tom and Linda Miller had a history of confrontations. These incidents added fuel to the fire of suspicion surrounding Tom. The investigators wondered if these conflicts had escalated to a point where Tom would seek revenge against his best friend, or if Linda was trying to blackmail her enemy. The police also explored Tom's alibi for the time of Daniel's death. They meticulously pieced together his movements, cross-referencing them with witness testimonies and surveillance footage from local establishments. The investigators left no stone unturned, determined to uncover the truth behind Daniel's tragic demise. As the investigation into Tom Richards continued, the detectives found themselves entangled in a web of secrets and lies. They knew that the truth was out there, waiting to be unraveled. But would they be able to piece together the puzzle and bring justice to Daniel Miller? In the midst of the investigation into the tragic demise of Danny Miller, the police made a crucial breakthrough. It was a cold, early November day, when snow, early for the season, began to fall, adding to the tension that gripped the investigators and the community. The discovery of this new evidence found hidden in the woods outside Springfield offered a glimmer of hope in uncovering the truth behind the heinous crime. The police painstakingly analyzed the newfound piece of the puzzle, an abandoned hard drive, leaving no stone unturned. They meticulously combed through the evidence, extracting vital information that would propel the investigation forward. The details were shocking and disturbing, shedding light on a dark secret that had been lurking beneath the surface. The evidence revealed that someone had been sexually targeting Danny's class, engaging in sexual activities with over half of the students, both male and female. The sexual encounters took place both inside and outside the school premises, exposing a dark underbelly that had remained hidden from the community's gaze. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community and raised alarming questions about the safety and well-being of the students. The police immediately reached out to the school authorities, who cooperated fully in the investigation. News of the shocking revelation spread like wildfire throughout Springfield, leaving parents and community members in a state of disbelief. The local media, including the Springfield Gazette and the town's radio station, dedicated extensive coverage to the case, urging anyone with information to come forward. The town was gripped with fear and anger, as parents grappled with the unsettling realization that their children had been involved in such salacious acts. As the investigation delved deeper into this disturbing aspect of the case, the police vowed to bring the predator to justice and ensure the safety of the students. They worked tirelessly, aiming to unravel the web of secrets and uncover the identity of the predator who had tarnished the purity of Springfield's teens. In the ongoing investigation into the tragic death of Daniel Miller, a high school history teacher from Springfield, Missouri, the police turned their attention to a surprising new suspect. Laura Day Davis, a senior student known for her empathy and leadership skills, became a person of interest in this puzzling case. Laura, a young woman on the cusp of adulthood, had been an active participant in Daniel's history class, where she displayed a deep admiration for her teacher. However, as the investigation unfolded, shocking revelations came to light about Laura's connection to Linda Miller, Daniel's wife. It appeared that Laura had been involved in a sexual relationship with Linda, a fact that had remained hidden from the community until now. This revelation has raised eyebrows and led investigators to question whether Laura's feelings of jealousy and revenge could have played a role in Daniel's untimely demise. During the police interrogation, Laura's emotions fluctuated, revealing a complex mix of anger, calmness, and something else entirely. The investigators carefully observed her every word and gesture, searching for clues that could shed light on her involvement in this tragic event. As the investigation deepened, it became apparent that Linda Miller had been sexually involved with numerous students in Danny's class, both male and female, in what appeared to be a vengeful act against her husband's perceived infidelity with Tom Richards, Daniel's best friend. This tangled web of relationships and secrets left investigators grappling with the true motives behind Daniel's murder. In November of 2009, the small community of Springfield was gripped by the shocking revelations surrounding the investigation. News outlets, such as the local newspaper the Springfield Gazette, covered the story extensively, leaving residents astounded by the depth of deceit and betrayal that had unfolded within their midst. In November of 2009, the investigation into the brutal murder of Daniel Miller took a shocking turn. The diligent work of the police led them to uncover the true mastermind behind this heinous crime. It was none other than Linda Miller, the wife of the victim. Linda, a 42-year-old ambitious real estate agent, had carefully orchestrated this sinister plot. Motivated by a desire for complete control over their assets and the freedom to continue her illicit relationships, Linda saw Daniel as an obstacle to her happiness and financial independence. She had meticulously planned every detail, ensuring that her involvement remained hidden from prying eyes. With the evidence mounting against her, the police had no choice but to apprehend Linda. On that fateful day, the authorities descended upon her, just as the sun began to set over their quiet suburban neighborhood. The scene was reminiscent of a dramatic movie, with police cars lining the streets and flashing lights illuminating the darkening sky. As Linda was escorted out of her home, the media swarmed around, hungry for the details of this shocking revelation. News cameras captured the moment, broadcasting it to households across the city. Headlines blared with the news of a wife's betrayal and a husband's tragic demise, capturing the attention of a captivated audience. The arrest itself was not without its own drama. Linda's emotions were a whirlwind, as she displayed a range of reactions. Her face, once composed and confident, now contorted with a mix of anger, fear, and disbelief. The media captured every fleeting expression, ensuring that the world witnessed the downfall of a woman who had once seemed so charming and successful. As Linda was led away, the police were left to ponder the depths of her involvement. The investigation had uncovered a web of lies, deceit, and betrayal, leaving the community shaken to its core. The small town of Springfield, Missouri, would forever be marked by this tragic event. In November of 2009, the courtroom became the center stage for justice as the trial of Linda Miller, the accused murderer of Daniel Miller, unfolded. The trial was a gripping spectacle that captivated the nation's attention. People from all walks of life tuned in to watch the proceedings, eager to see if justice would prevail. The prosecution, led by seasoned lawyer J. Roy, meticulously presented their case against Linda. They called numerous witnesses, including detectives, forensic experts, and even Daniel's close friends, who testified about Linda's troubled marriage and her alleged extramarital affairs. The evidence against Linda was overwhelming, with the prosecution unveiling phone records, emails, and even surveillance footage that painted a damning picture of her involvement in the crime. On the other side of the courtroom, defense attorney Sarah Claxon Roberts fought fiercely to protect her client's interests. She argued that the evidence presented by the prosecution was circumstantial and failed to prove Linda's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Claxon Roberts attempted to cast doubt on the credibility of the witnesses and questioned the validity of the forensic evidence. The trial lasted for several weeks, with both sides presenting their closing arguments to the jury. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the jurors deliberated over Linda's fate. After hours of careful consideration, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Linda Miller was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions: relief for Daniel's family and friends, and shock for Linda and her supporters. The judge, known for his no-nonsense approach, wasted no time in delivering the sentence. Linda was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom fell silent as the weight of the verdict sank in. Linda's fate was sealed, and she would spend the rest of her days behind bars, paying for the heinous crime she committed. As the trial came to a close, the media frenzy surrounding the case slowly subsided. The Miller family, though forever scarred by the tragedy, found solace in the fact that justice had been served. The community of Springfield, Missouri, rallied around them, offering support and condolences during this difficult time. In the end, the trial of Linda Miller served as a stark reminder of the fragility of human relationships and the devastating consequences of betrayal. It was a chapter in history that would forever be etched in the memories of those who lived through it. After the dramatic conclusion of the trial, the lives of those involved took different paths as they tried to find a sense of normalcy in the aftermath of the shocking events. The suspects, the police, and the victim's family all faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives, forever impacted by the betrayal and tragedy that unfolded. Linda Miller, the mastermind behind the heinous crime, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was transferred to the Missouri State Penitentiary, a maximum security facility known for housing some of the state's most dangerous criminals. The community, still reeling from the shocking revelations, found some solace in knowing that justice had been served. Detective Huey Ducky Hughes and his team, hailed as heroes for their relentless pursuit of the truth, continued their work in the Springfield Police Department. Their dedication and meticulousness in solving Daniel Miller's murder earned them accolades from their superiors and the community. The victim's family, devastated by their loss, sought solace in their memories of Daniel and the support of their friends and neighbors. They held a private memorial service at the Green Lawn Funeral Home, where family and friends gathered to pay their respects. The service was marked by tears, heartfelt eulogies, and a sense of unity among those who loved Daniel. As the years passed, the community slowly healed from the wounds inflicted by the tragedy. Springfield, known for its vibrant community spirit, rallied together to support the Miller family and remember Daniel's legacy as a beloved teacher. The local high school, where Daniel had taught for many years, established a scholarship in his honor, ensuring that his passion for education would live on. As the years went by, the wounds slowly healed, but the memory of Daniel Miller and the tragic events surrounding his murder remained etched in the collective consciousness of the Springfield community. The story served as a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing those we hold dear. And there you have it, the haunting tale of betrayal and murder that unfolded in Springfield, Missouri. The web of secrets, lies, and infidelity tore apart the lives of those involved, leaving an indelible mark on the community. Michael Marshall Tucker was a 47-year-old man who lived in Pacifica, California. He worked as a software engineer, which means he made programs for computers. He was really good at his job and came up with many new ideas. Marshall was known for working hard and always trying his best. Marshall had a happy family. He was married to Laney, and they had 2 children. Activia was 14 years old, and Marlboro was 10 years old. The family lived in a nice house near the beach. Marshall loved his family very much and always spent time with them. He often took them hiking on the weekends. They went to places like Maury Point and the Sweeney Ridge Trail. Marshall liked taking pictures of nature, especially the ocean and sunsets. He had a camera and always carried it with him on hikes. Marshall went to Stanford University, where he met his best friend, Nate Harrison. Nate and Marshall stayed close friends even after college. They both worked at the same tech company, which made computer programs for big businesses. In his free time, Marshall liked to read books about technology and science. He also liked watching shows like The X-Files and Star Trek Voyager with his kids. People who knew Marshall said he was kind and helpful. His friends and co-workers admired him for being smart and caring. He always had a smile on his face and was ready to help anyone in need. At work, he was excited about a new project that he thought would change how people use computers. Marshall and his team were working on this project, hoping to present it to the company leaders soon. In the days before his death, Marshall was busy but happy. He talked about the family hiking trip they had planned for the weekend. They were going to visit Point Reyes National Seashore. Marshall was also helping Activia with her science project about marine life. He spent time with Marlboro building a model rocket. Marshall was looking forward to many things. He dreamed of one day starting his own tech company. He also wanted to travel with his family to places like Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Canyon. Marshall Tucker was a good man with big dreams and a loving family. His sudden and tragic death left a huge hole in the lives of those who loved him. On March 23, 2003, the weather in Pacifica, California, was cloudy and cool. At about 8 o'clock a.m., Activia Tucker, Marshall's 14-year-old daughter, woke up and went downstairs to the living room. She was expecting to see her dad getting ready for their planned hike. Instead, she found a terrifying scene that would change her life forever. The living room was a mess. Furniture was turned over, and things were scattered everywhere. In the middle of the room, Activia saw her father, Marshall, lying on the floor. There was blood around his head, and he wasn't moving. Activia screamed and called out for her mother, Laney. Laney Tucker rushed into the room. She saw Marshall and immediately ran to the phone to call 911. Her hands were shaking, and her voice was trembling as she told the operator what had happened. She said it looked like someone had broken into their house and hurt her husband. The police arrived quickly. Officers were on the scene within 10 minutes. Officer Mark Stevens was the first to enter the house. He found Laney crying and holding Activia, who was still in shock. Stevens asked them to step outside while he checked the rest of the house. Officer Stevens noticed the living room blip like someone had tried to make it appear as if a robbery had occurred, but there were too many things that didn't add up. Valuable items, like the TV and Laney's jewelry, were left untouched. Marshall's body was lying near the fireplace. Next to him was a heavy ornate candlestick that was covered in blood. It was clear that this was the weapon used to kill him. The detectives began their work, taking pictures of the scene and collecting evidence. They dusted for fingerprints and looked for any clues that might tell them who had done this. Outside, Laney and Activia were talking to each other. Laney was trying to stay calm for her daughter, but it was clear that she was devastated. Activia was crying and kept asking why someone would hurt her dad. The discovery of Marshall Tucker's body was the start of a complicated and tragic investigation. The peaceful life of the Tucker family was shattered, and the search for the truth had just begun. When the police arrived at the Tucker home on March 23, 2003, they quickly secured the scene. The lead investigators, Detectives Laura Grant and Michael Chua, both experienced and respected, began their work. Detective Grant was 45 years old, with short brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude. Detective Chua, 50, was tall and lean, known for his sharp intuition. The living room was a chaotic scene. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out, and items were scattered all over the floor. It looked like someone had tried to make it seem like a robbery. However, some valuable items were left untouched, which made the detectives suspicious. A flat-screen TV, Laney's expensive jewelry, and a new laptop were still in place. Marshall's body was found near the fireplace. His head was badly injured, and there was blood on an ornate candlestick nearby. The candlestick, a heavy piece from their mantel, was clearly the murder weapon. Marshall's wounds showed he had been hit multiple times, indicating a violent struggle. Detective Grant and Detective Chua started their investigation by looking closely at the crime scene. They took photos and collected evidence. They also dusted for fingerprints on the candlestick and other surfaces. Forensic experts arrived to help, wearing white suits to avoid contaminating the scene. They collected blood samples and fibers that might provide clues. The detectives interviewed Laney and Olivia outside the house. Laney, still in shock, tried to explain what had happened. She said she had been asleep and didn't hear anything unusual. Olivia, who found her father, was too shaken to speak much. Officer Mark Stevens, who was the first to arrive, helped keep them calm and took their initial statements. Detective Grant noted that there were no signs of forced entry. The door was intact and the windows were not broken. This suggested that the killer either had a key or was let in by someone inside. This made the detectives think that the killer might be someone Marshall knew. The police used special lights to look for hidden evidence, like footprints or blood traces. They also used a device to check for any recent calls or messages on Marshall's and Laney's phones. They hoped this could lead them to more clues about what happened. The investigation team worked through the day, piecing together what they could from the chaotic scene. They collected all the evidence carefully, knowing that each piece might be crucial to solving the case. Marshall Tucker's murder was a shocking and tragic event in the peaceful town of Pacifica. The detectives knew they had a tough job ahead to uncover the truth and bring justice to Marshall and his grieving family. Laney Tucker, Marshall's wife, was the first suspect. Laney was 41 years old, a creative and quiet person. She loved writing adult fiction, especially stories with violent and intense themes. Over the past year, Laney became deeply involved in a fantasy world she created. Her latest story was about a twisted love affair, and her friends noticed that she started mixing up her fantasy with real life. The police found Laney's behavior odd. She seemed distant and sometimes confused about what was real. Detective Grant and Detective Chua brought her in for questioning the day after Marshall was found. They asked her about her relationship with Marshall and what she was doing the night of the murder. Laney told them she had been asleep and didn't hear anything. She said she loved Marshall and couldn't understand why someone would want to hurt him. The detectives noticed that she seemed nervous, often fidgeting and avoiding eye contact. They asked her about her writing and if she ever felt like her stories affected her real life. Laney insisted that her writing was just a hobby and had nothing to do with Marshall's death. The detectives also looked into Laney's recent activities. They found out that she had been acting strangely at her writing group meetings. Her friends said she talked a lot about her story and seemed obsessed with the idea of a dramatic and tragic love. Some of them even wondered if she was getting too involved in her fiction. During the interrogation, Laney's answers were often vague. She didn't have a clear alibi for the night of the murders, saying only that she had taken some sleeping pills and gone to bed early. The detectives asked if anyone else had a key to their house. Laney said only she and Marshall had keys, which made them even more suspicious. The detectives also checked Laney's phone records. They found several text messages and emails that showed her growing obsession with her story. One message to a friend said, "Sometimes I feel like my characters are more real than my own life." This made the detectives think that Laney might have blurred the lines between her fantasy and reality. Laney's reaction to the interrogation was mostly calm, but she seemed tired and stressed. The detectives couldn't tell that she was hiding something or just overwhelmed by the situation. They decided to keep an eye on her while they continued their investigation, looking for more clues that could either prove her guilt or clear her name. Laney Tucker's behavior and her intense connection to her fictional world made her a prime suspect in Marshall's murder, but the detectives needed more evidence to know for sure if she was responsible. Nate Harrison, Marshall's best friend, was the second suspect. Nate was 39 years old and worked with Marshall at the same tech company. He was outgoing, friendly, and known for his easygoing nature. Nate often visited the Tucker household and was considered part of the family. He shared Marshall's passion for technology and innovation, and they had been close friends since their days at Stanford University. Detective Grant and Detective Chua brought Nate in for questioning. They wanted to understand his relationship with Marshall and Laney better. Nate seemed surprised by the suspicion but cooperated fully with the police. He told them about his long friendship with Marshall and how they worked together on many projects. Nate explained that he had been at home the night of the murder working on a new software project. He provided the detectives with the name of a colleague who could confirm he had been online, working late into the night. Nate seemed genuinely upset about Marshall's death and couldn't believe that someone would kill his best friend. The detectives asked Nate about his relationship with Laney. He admitted that he and Laney had become closer over the past year, especially as she struggled with her writing and mental health. Nate said he often tried to support her and keep her grounded when she got too involved in her fictional world. When asked if he had any romantic feelings for Laney, Nate hesitated but then confessed that he did have feelings for her. He quickly added that he never acted on them and that his loyalty was always to Marshall. The detectives found this interesting and wondered if Nate's feelings for Laney could be a motive. The detectives also checked Nate's phone records and computer activity. They found that Nate had sent many messages to Laney, encouraging her writing and offering emotional support. There was nothing directly suspicious in the messages, but the frequency of their communication raised some questions. Nate's demeanor during the interrogation was mostly calm, but he appeared anxious at times, especially when discussing Laney. He seemed genuinely hurt by the loss of his friend and worried about Laney's well-being. The detectives could not determine if his anxiety was due to grief or something more. Nate's strong friendship with Marshall and his unspoken love for Laney made him a complicated figure in the investigation. The detectives needed more evidence to determine if Nate's feelings had anything to do with Marshall's murder, or if he was simply a supportive friend caught in a tragic situation. Nate Harrison's deep connection to both Marshall and Laney made him an important part of the investigation, and the detectives continued to probe for more details that could clarify his role in the unfolding mystery. On March 27, 2003, 4 days after Marshall Tucker's murder, the weather in Pacifica, California, was rainy and cold. Detective Grant and Detective Chua were at the police station when they received a call about new evidence. An officer had found something unusual while going through Laney's phone records and computer files. The new evidence was a series of emails and text messages between Laney and Nate. These messages were different from the ones the detectives had seen before. They were more personal and hinted at something troubling. In one message, Laney wrote to Nate, "I can't stop thinking about my story. It feels so real. Sometimes I wonder if the only way to end it is to make it real." The detectives felt a chill reading the message. It seemed like Laney was losing her grip on reality. Another message from Nate to Laney said, "If this is what you think has to happen, I'm here for you. Just be careful." This message made the detectives suspect that Nate might have known about Laney's plan to kill Marshall. Detective Grant and Detective Chua quickly went to Laney's house to talk to her again. Laney was cooperative but looked tired and stressed. The detectives showed her the messages and asked what they meant. Laney broke down in tears and said she didn't know what was real anymore. She said that she had been so wrapped up in her fantasy world that she felt like it was taking over her life. While Laney was talking, Detective Chua received a call from the forensic team. They had found traces of Nate's fingerprints on the candlestick, the murder weapon. This new evidence was crucial. It showed that Nate had been in the house and touched the weapon. The detectives went to Nate's house to confront him. It was still raining heavily, making the scene feel even more intense. Nate was shocked to see the detectives but let them in. They showed him the messages and told him about the fingerprints. Nate tried to explain that he had been at the Tucker house many times and could have touched the candlestick before, but the detectives didn't believe him. Detective Grant and Detective Chua arrested Nate on suspicion of being involved in Marshall's murder. Nate protested, saying he was only trying to help Laney, but the evidence was strong against him. The new evidence changed the direction of the investigation. The detectives now believed that both Laney and Nate were involved in Marshall's death. They continued to dig deeper, looking for more clues to piece together the full story. The discovery of the messages and fingerprints brought new light to the case, making it clear that the investigation was far from over. The detectives were determined to find the truth and bring justice for Marshall Tucker. Anna Louise Reed was the third suspect. Anna Louise was 24 years old and lived next door to the Tucker family. She was a social worker known for her compassion and protective nature. She often spent time with Laney, offering support during difficult times. Rumors of a romantic relationship between Anna Louise and Laney added a layer of complexity to the investigation. Detective Grant and Detective Chua decided to bring Anna Louise in for questioning. She seemed surprised but agreed to cooperate. Anna Louise described her friendship with Laney and how she often tried to help her through her emotional struggles. She admitted they were very close but denied any romantic involvement. Anna Louise told the detectives she had been at home the night of the murder, reading a book and watching TV. She said she heard nothing unusual and didn't know anything about Marshall's death until Laney called her the next morning. The detectives checked her alibi, looking for any inconsistencies. During the interrogation, Anna Louise appeared calm and composed. She answered all the questions without hesitation. However, the detectives noticed she seemed particularly concerned about Laney's well-being. When asked about Laney's mental state, Anna Louise said Laney had been struggling with reality and often got lost in her fictional world. The detectives asked Anna Louise if she knew about Laney's plans to kill Marshall. She denied knowing anything and said she would have tried to stop her if she did. The detectives found it hard to believe that someone as close to Laney as Anna Louise wouldn't have noticed something was wrong. The detectives also checked Anna Louise's phone records. They found numerous text messages between her and Laney. Most messages were about everyday things, but some hinted at Laney's emotional turmoil. In one message, Laney wrote, "Sometimes I feel like my stories are more real than my life." Anna Louise replied, "You need to focus on reality. I'm here for you." Detective Grant and Detective Chua continued to question Anna Louise, trying to find any clue that might link her to the crime. They asked about her relationship with Marshall and if she ever felt jealous of him. Anna Louise said she respected Marshall and would never do anything to harm him. Despite Anna Louise's calm demeanor and seemingly solid alibi, the detectives were not entirely convinced of her innocence. They believed she might know more than she was letting on. They decided to keep a close eye on her while they continued their investigation. Anna Louise Reed's involvement in the Tucker family's lives and her close relationship with Laney made her a key figure in the case. The detectives knew they needed more evidence to determine her role, if any, in Marshall's murder. On March 30, 2003, a week after Marshall Tucker's murder, the weather was clear and cool in Pacifica, California. Detectives Grant and Chua received a crucial tip from the forensic team. They discovered a series of incriminating messages on Laney's phone that linked Nate Harrison directly to the crime. These messages showed Nate's encouragement and guidance, proving he knew about Laney's plan to kill Marshall. Laney Tucker, 41, was the murderer. She had become obsessed with a twisted fantasy world she created, believing that Marshall's death was necessary to immortalize their love story. Laney's mental state had deteriorated to the point where she couldn't distinguish between fiction and reality. Her obsession with her violent stories drove her to bludgeon Marshall with an ornate candlestick from their living room. Detectives Grant and Chua realized that Nate Harrison, 39, was not just an innocent bystander. Nate had harbored secret feelings for Laney, and instead of preventing the murder, he manipulated the situation to make sure it happened. Nate believed that with Marshall out of the way, he could finally be with Laney. He provided Laney with the means to carry out the murder and helped her stage the burglary scene. The detectives reviewed the evidence and planned their approach. On the evening of March 30, they drove to Nate's house. The sky was clear. and the air was crisp. They knocked on Nate's door, and he answered, looking surprised to see them. Detective Grant told him they needed to talk about new evidence in the case. Inside, they showed Nate the messages and explained what they had found. Nate's face turned pale, and he tried to deny everything, but the evidence was too strong. Detective Chua calmly placed Nate under arrest for his involvement in Marshall's murder. Nate looked shocked and defeated as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Lainey was also arrested at her home. She didn't resist and seemed almost relieved. When the detectives told her they knew the full story, she broke down, admitting that she believed Marshall's death was a tragic necessity for their love story. Marshall's family was devastated by the news of Lainey and Nate's betrayal. They couldn't understand how the people closest to Marshall could do such a thing. The arrest of Lainey and Nate brought a mix of grief and relief. They were heartbroken over the loss of Marshall, but relieved that justice would be served. The clear skies of March 30, 2003, marked a turning point in the case. The detectives had solved the mystery, bringing closure to Marshall Tucker's family and the community of Pacifica. The trial of Lainey Tucker and May Harrison began on June 15, 2003, in the Pacifica Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters from local news stations like KTVU and the Pacifica Tribune. The public was eager to see justice served for the murder of Marshall Tucker. The prosecutor, Samantha Klein, 45, was known for her tough and determined nature. She presented a strong case against Lainey and Nate, showing the jury the incriminating messages and evidence from the crime scene. Klein argued that Lainey's delusional fantasy had led her to murder her husband, and that Nate had manipulated her to fulfill his own selfish desires. On the defense side was Robert Hayes, 50, a seasoned attorney known for his calm demeanor and sharp mind. He argued that Lainey was mentally unstable and couldn't fully comprehend her actions. Hayes claimed that Nate's involvement was merely that of a misguided friend trying to help. He emphasized that Nate never directly participated in the murder. During the trial, the victim's family watched with heavy hearts. Marshall's parents, siblings, and children were present every day, hoping for justice. They listened intently as witnesses testified about Lainey's erratic behavior and Nate's secret love for her. The emotional toll was evident as they struggled with the betrayal by people they had trusted. After weeks of testimony and arguments, the jury deliberated for 2 days. On July 1, 2003, they reached a verdict. Lainey Tucker was found guilty of first-degree murder. Nate Harrison was found guilty of being an accessory to murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdicts were read. Judge Evelyn Carter, 55, delivered the sentences. Lainey was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Nate received a 25-year sentence for his role in the crime. Both sentences reflected the severity of their actions and the impact on Marshall's family. The sentencing brought mixed feelings among the victim's family and friends. While they were relieved that Lainey and Nate were held accountable, the harsh reality of losing Marshall forever weighed heavily on them. They felt a sense of justice, but the pain of their loss remained. The trial and sentencing had a significant impact on the community of Pacifica. People discussed the case in cafes and on local radio stations like KGO. It served as a grim reminder of how quickly life could change and the importance of mental health awareness. The story of Marshall Tucker's murder and the subsequent trial left a lasting impression on everyone involved. It was a tragic tale of love, betrayal, and the search for justice in a quiet coastal town. After the trial, the community of Pacifica tried to return to normal. The events have left a deep scar, but people were determined to move forward. The Tucker family, especially, faced the challenge of rebuilding their lives without Marshall. Lainey Tucker, now serving her life sentence, was transferred to the California Institution for Women. She received psychiatric treatment for her mental health issues. Lainey spent her days writing and attending therapy sessions. She expressed remorse for her actions but knew she would never be able to undo the damage she had caused. Nate Harrison, sentenced to 25 years, was incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison. He struggled with guilt and regret, understanding the gravity of his manipulation. Nate's family distanced themselves from him, unable to comprehend his actions. It used his time in prison to reflect on his mistakes, participating in rehabilitation programs and counseling. The community of Pacifica held a memorial for Marshall Tucker every year on the anniversary of his death. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered to remember him and celebrate his life. The memorial became a symbol of the town's resilience and unity. Life in Pacifica slowly returned to normal, but the memory of Marshall Tucker and the lessons from his tragic death remained. The community, united by their shared grief, became stronger and more supportive of one another, determined to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. Kyle Ellerby was an 18-year-old high school senior from Carbondale, Illinois, known for his bright future both on and off the football field. As the star quarterback of Carbondale Community High School's football team, Kyle was admired by his classmates and respected by his coaches. His athletic talent had earned him the nickname Golden Boy among his peers, and he was often featured in local sports reports. He had dreams of playing college football, and several universities had shown interest in recruiting him. Kyle lived with his parents, Richard Ralph Ellerby, 48, and Cindy Ellerby, 45, in a comfortable suburban home. Ralph, a sales manager, was a former athlete himself, having once been a promising football player before a knee injury ended his sports career. He poured his unfulfilled ambitions into Kyle, pushing him to excel in football. Cindy, once vibrant and full of life, had become increasingly withdrawn, battling alcoholism and feelings of inadequacy. The pressure of maintaining appearances weighed heavily on the family, particularly on Kyle, who felt the burden of living up to his father's high expectations. Despite his confident exterior, Kyle was a deeply sensitive young man. He struggled with his sexual identity, a secret he kept hidden from everyone, including his closest friends. The only person who knew the truth was his football coach, Robert J. McMurdo, with whom Kyle had developed a secret sexual relationship. The relationship was a source of both comfort and stress for Kyle, who feared the consequences if their affair were ever discovered. In the days leading up to his death, Kyle was focused on his future. He was preparing for final exams and looking forward to graduation. He spent hours practicing on the football field, determined to secure a college scholarship. However, the stress of maintaining his secret life took its toll. Friends noticed he seemed distracted and more withdrawn than usual. His normally bright smile was replaced by a look of worry. At home, tensions were high, with his mother's drinking spiraling out of control and his father's demands growing more intense. Kyle's last days were a mix of hope and fear as he balanced his dreams of a bright future with the shocking secrets that would ultimately lead to his tragic end. On the morning of May 12, 2014, at around 7:30 a.m., Ralph Ellerby walked downstairs into the basement of his family's home in Carbondale, Illinois, expecting to find his son Kyle getting ready for school. Instead, Ralph stumbled upon a scene that would haunt him forever. Kyle's lifeless body was sprawled at the bottom of the stairs, surrounded by sports equipment and memorabilia, including the football trophies he had won over the years. The basement, usually a place of pride for the Ellerby family, had become the site of a tragic discovery. Ralph's first reaction was shock. He stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what he was seeing. The 48-year-old sales manager, who had always been so proud of his son's accomplishments, now felt a wave of panic and disbelief wash over him. He rushed to Kyle's side, desperately checking for signs of life, but it was clear that his son was gone. The boy who had been the center of his world, the one he had pushed so hard to succeed, was now lying dead at his feet. After a few moments, Ralph managed to gather himself enough to call 911. His voice was shaky and hoarse as he reported what he had found. "My son, he's not breathing," he stammered. The 911 operator tried to keep him calm, asking for details, but Ralph could barely focus on the questions. All he could think about was Kyle and the horrible realization that his son would never fulfill the dreams they had both worked so hard for. When the paramedics arrived a few minutes later, they confirmed what Ralph had already known deep down. Kyle was dead. The scene was eerily quiet, with only the sound of Ralph's heavy breathing and the distant hum of a television in the living room, which had been left on. Cindy Ellerby, Kyle's mother, drunk and still asleep upstairs, was unaware of the tragedy that had just unfolded. It wasn't until Ralph's anguished cries echoed through the house that she awoke, disoriented, and still groggy from the night before. When she finally realized what had happened, her screams pierced the quiet morning, adding to the grief that was now overwhelming the Ellerby household. The Carbondale police arrived at the Ellerby residence around 8:00 a.m. on May 12, 2014, just minutes after Ralph's frantic 911 call. Leading the investigation was Detective Sally O'Malley, a seasoned officer known for her sharp instincts and no-nonsense approach. O'Malley, 42, had been with the Carbondale Police Department for over 15 years and had handled her fair share of tough cases, but the death of a popular high school quarterback like Kyle Ellerby was sure to be one of the most challenging. When O'Malley and her team entered the basement, they found a scene that didn't quite add up. Kyle's body lay at the foot of the stairs, with a large football trophy nearby. The room was cluttered with sports equipment, Helmets, jerseys, and footballs were scattered around. But there was something about the positioning of the body and the items around it that caught O'Malley's attention. The detective noted that while Kyle's head injury appeared consistent with the fall, a lack of blood and the angle of his body suggested something more sinister. The basement was dimly lit, with only a few small windows allowing in the morning light. The walls were adorned with posters of NFL stars like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and the shelves were lined with trophies, highlighting Kyle's impressive athletic achievements. O'Malley carefully examined the scene, noting the absence of any clear signs of struggle, but her experience told her that what seemed like an accident could easily be a staged crime. As the forensics team began their work, taking photos and collecting evidence, O'Malley focused on the heavy football trophy that was lying next to Kyle. It was large enough to inflict a fatal blow, and there were faint smudges on it that looked like fingerprints. The detective ordered it to be bagged as evidence, suspecting it could be the murder weapon. The rest of the house was searched as well. The living room still had the TV on, playing Good Morning America on ABC, while Cindy Ellerby sat on the couch in shock, a half-empty bottle of vodka on the coffee table in front of her. Ralph, who had made the initial discovery, was pacing the floor, visibly distraught but cooperating with the officers. Detective O'Malley's instincts told her this wasn't just a tragic accident. The eeriness of the scene, combined with the odd details, hinted at something far more complex. As the investigation unfolded, it would soon become clear that Kyle Ellerby's death was not what it appeared to be. The first person Detective O'Malley turned her attention to was Coach Robert J. McMurdo, the 46-year-old football coach at Carbondale Community High School. Coach McMurdo was well known in the community, not just for leading the football team to numerous victories, but also for his charismatic and authoritative presence. He had a reputation for being tough but fair, someone who could bring out the best in his players. Underneath his confident exterior, however, O'Malley suspected there might be more to the coach than met the eye. At the police station, McMurdo was cooperative but clearly nervous. He sat across from Detective O'Malley in a small, dimly lit interrogation room. The walls were bare, and the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. O'Malley began the interview by asking McMurdo about his relationship with Kyle. The coach spoke fondly of the young man, describing him as one of the most talented and dedicated players he had ever coached. With that body of his, Kyle had a natural gift, McMurdo said, his voice trembling slightly. He could read the field like no one else. I had big plans for him. But when O'Malley pressed further, asking if their relationship extended beyond the football field, McMurdo hesitated. His discomfort was palpable as he struggled to maintain his composure. He admitted he cared about Kyle, but only as a coach cares for any of his players. O'Malley wasn't convinced. She could see the guilt in his eyes, the fear of something being exposed. She then asked directly about any sexual relationship between him and Kyle, a question that made McMurdo visibly tense. His denial was immediate, but there was a quiver in his voice that O'Malley couldn't ignore. The detective then shifted the conversation to the morning of Kyle's death, asking McMurdo about his whereabouts and whether he had any contact with Kyle that day. The coach insisted he was at home preparing for practice and hadn't spoken to Kyle since the previous day. However, when O'Malley presented him with a record of sexually explicit text messages and naked pictures sent between him and Kyle, sent late the night before, McMurdo's calm demeanor began to crack. McMurdo's face went pale as he realized the evidence against him was mounting. He had a body like Adonis, he exclaimed. Robert told police he was conflicted by his romantic relationship with Kyle, which turned sexual after watching Kyle shower after a practice. He said he genuinely loved the young man, but he knew the consequences if their affair were ever discovered. Throughout the interrogation, McMurdo maintained his innocence, but his nervousness only grew. He repeatedly wiped his forehead with a handkerchief, his hands shaking slightly. Despite his efforts to appear in control, it was clear that the pressure was getting to him. O'Malley knew she had rattled him, but she also knew that without a confession or more concrete evidence, she couldn't arrest him just yet. The interrogation ended with McMurdo being released, but not before O'Malley made it clear that he was now a prime suspect in the investigation. Next, Detective Sally O'Malley turned her attention to Richard Ralph Ellerby, Kyle's 48-year-old father. Ralph was a sales manager at a local auto dealership and a well-known figure in Carbondale. He had a reputation as a proud, ambitious man who lived vicariously through his son's accomplishments. Once a star high school athlete himself, Ralph's football career was cut short by a knee injury. He had channeled all his unfulfilled dreams into Kyle, pushing him to excel on the football field. On the morning of Kyle's death, Ralph's reaction was intense. He was visibly distressed and kept asking the officers what had happened to his son. According to witnesses, he seemed more agitated than heartbroken. His concern focused on how this tragedy might affect Kyle's legacy and the family's reputation. During his interview with O'Malley, Ralph was cooperative but defensive. He spoke proudly of Kyle's achievements, emphasizing how much he had invested in his son's future. Kyle was destined for greatness, Ralph said, his voice thick with emotion. He was gonna go all the way to the NFL, and I was going to make sure of it. But as the conversation shifted to Kyle's personal life, Ralph's tone changed. He became evasive, particularly when O'Malley asked about Kyle's relationship with Coach McMurdo. O'Malley had already discovered that Ralph's and McMurdo's relationship was sexual. Ralph often attended practices, games, and even team meetings where he and the coach would discuss Kyle's progress and future. When asked if he knew about Kyle's sexual involvement with McMurdo, Ralph hesitated. He eventually admitted that he had heard rumors, but insisted he didn't believe them. However, O'Malley wasn't entirely convinced. She had evidence suggesting that Ralph knew more than he was letting on. Text messages between Ralph and McMurdo, found on Ralph's phone, vividly showed that he was aware of the relationship between his son and the coach, even planning dates for him and offering to be a lookout. In one exchange, Ralph even congratulated the coach, telling him that his sex with Kyle must have been behind his 3 touchdowns during a previous game. Despite Ralph's efforts to appear calm and collected, O'Malley noticed cracks in his composure. His voice would occasionally waver, and he seemed unusually anxious when discussing certain topics. The detective suspected that Ralph's deep-seated homophobia and fear of scandal had created a volatile mix of emotions that he was struggling to keep under control. As the interview concluded, O'Malley couldn't shake the feeling that Ralph was hiding something. His refusal to fully acknowledge the possibility of his son's involvement with Coach McMurdo, coupled with his obvious discomfort, made him a person of interest in the ongoing investigation. The final suspect on Detective Sally O'Malley's list was Cindy Ellerby, Kyle's 45-year-old mother. Cindy had once been a vibrant woman, a formed teen beauty queen with a lively personality. But by May of 2014, she had become a shadow of her former self, struggling with alcoholism and deep-seated feelings of sexual inadequacy. Her marriage to Ralph had grown strained and loveless, and she often felt overlooked in her own home, especially as Ralph focused all his attention on Kyle's football career. Cindy's descent into alcohol abuse had become well known in the community. Neighbors frequently saw her at the local liquor store, often buying bottles of cheap vodka. Her drinking had escalated to the point where she was rarely sober, leading to erratic behavior that further isolated her from friends and family. Cindy's relationship with Kyle had also deteriorated. She resented the pressure placed on him by Ralph and was deeply jealous of the close bond between Kyle and his father. On the morning of Kyle's death, Cindy had been at home. When the police arrived, they found her in a state of hysteria, alternating between sobbing uncontrollably and shouting incoherently. Her disheveled appearance and the smell of alcohol on her breath raised immediate concerns among the officers on the scene. During her interview with Detective O'Malley, Cindy was unstable and emotional. She fluctuated between anger and sadness, her responses often incoherent. O'Malley asked about Cindy's relationship with Kyle, and Cindy's answers were evasive. "Kyle was my baby," she said repeatedly, but when pressed for details about their interactions in the days leading up to his death, she struggled to provide clear answers. O'Malley also inquired about Cindy's relationship with Coach McMurdo. Cindy's reaction was telling. Her face twisted in anger, and she accused her son of taking away Coach McMurdo from her. Kyle had the mind of a hussy and the body of Tom Brady. She spat out, her words dripping with bitterness. "Why did he have to take my man?" As the interview progressed, Cindy became increasingly agitated, especially when O'Malley suggested that Kyle's death might not have been an accident. Cindy's mood swings and erratic behavior made it difficult to get a coherent narrative from her. However, O'Malley noted that Cindy's anger toward McMurdo and her jealousy of Kyle's relationship with his father seemed to be driving her emotional outbursts. Despite her unstable demeanor, Cindy remained a person of interest. O'Malley couldn't ignore the possibility that Cindy's deep-seated resentments and her deteriorating mental state might have played a role in Kyle's death. The detective left the interview with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Cindy Ellerby's troubled past and volatile emotions made her a key figure in this tragic case. On May 18, 2014, just a week after Kyle Ellerby's tragic death, a startling new development shook the town of Carbondale. It happened during Kyle's memorial service, held at the local high school gymnasium, where hundreds of mourners gathered to pay their respects. The atmosphere was heavy with grief, but it was Ralph Ellerby's unexpected outburst that left everyone in shock. Ralph, visibly intoxicated and overcome with emotion, stood up in the middle of the service. His words were slurred, but the message was clear. He confessed to knowing that his wife, Cindy Ellerby, had killed their son. Ralph revealed that he had helped Cindy stage the scene to look like an accident in a desperate attempt to protect their family from scandal. The crowd was stunned into silence, unable to process the magnitude of his admission. Detective Sally O'Malley, who had been attending the service to observe the family's behavior, immediately knew the investigation had just taken a critical turn. After Ralph's confession, the Carbondale Police Department quickly responded, taking Ralph into custody for further questioning. The police returned to the Ellerby household, this time with a clearer understanding of what they were looking for. Inside the home, they revisited the basement where Kyle's body had been found. With Ralph's confession in mind, the officers searched for any evidence that could corroborate his story. They discovered traces of blood that had been poorly cleaned, as well as additional fragments of the shattered trophy that had been missed during the initial investigation. Forensic experts re-examined the evidence, confirming that the blood found at the scene matched Kyle's DNA. Ralph's confession, combined with the physical evidence, painted a grim picture of the events leading up to Kyle's death. It was now evident that Cindy had struck Kyle with the trophy in a fit of rage, and that Ralph had assisted her in covering up the crime. The community was left reeling from Ralph's shocking revelation. What had once been seen as a tragic accident was now understood to be a brutal murder, meticulously concealed by the very people who should have protected Kyle the most. This new evidence and Ralph's confession brought the investigation to a critical juncture, setting the stage for a shocking arrest. Following Ralph Ellerby's shocking confession at his son Kyle's memorial service, the Carbondale Police Department wasted no time in moving forward with the investigation. On May 20, 2014, just 48 hours after Ralph's admission, the police officially identified Cindy Ellerby as the prime suspect in Kyle's murder. Cindy, a 45-year-old homemaker struggling with alcoholism, had long been a troubled figure in the community. Her erratic behavior and strained relationship with Kyle had not gone unnoticed by neighbors and friends, but the truth of her involvement in his death was still a bitter pill for many to swallow. Detective Sally O'Malley led the charge to bring Cindy into custody. The team assembled at the Ellerby household early that morning. The atmosphere was tense, with overcast skies matching the somber mood of the officers. When they arrived at the door, Cindy answered, looking disheveled and weary, as if she had aged years in the days since the memorial. Without much resistance, Cindy was placed under arrest. The weight of the moment seemed to hit her all at once, and she broke down in tears, not out of surprise, but out of resignation. She knew that the truth had finally caught up with her. As Cindy was escorted to the police car, the neighborhood was eerily quiet, with only the distant hum of morning traffic breaking the silence. Inside the station, she was formally charged with the murder of her son, Kyle Ellerby. During her initial interrogation, Cindy was emotional but cooperative, providing a detailed account of the events leading up to the murder. She admitted that on the night of Kyle's death, she had been drinking heavily. An argument with Kyle had escalated, fueled by her smoldering jealousy over his sexual relationship with Coach Murdo. In a blind rage, she grabbed one of Kyle's football trophies and struck him with it, killing him instantly. Cindy explained how Ralph, upon discovering what she had done, decided to help her stage the scene as an accident. Together, they dragged Kyle's body to the bottom of the basement stairs and scattered sports equipment around to make it appear as though he had fallen. Ralph had hoped that this would keep their family's dark secret hidden, but his conscience ultimately betrayed him. The arrest of Cindy Ellerby sent shockwaves through the community. For the Ellerby family, once admired for their success and unity, the reality of their downfall was now laid bare. The reactions of those close to Kyle were a mix of anger, sorrow, and disbelief. A struggle to comprehend how a mother could commit such a heinous act against her own child. Cindy Ellerby's trial for the murder of her son, Kyle Ellerby, began in late August 2014 at the Jackson County Courthouse in Carbondale, Illinois. The case quickly became the talk of the town, with local media outlets like the Southern Illinoisan covering every detail. The courtroom was packed with spectators, many of whom had known the Ellerby family for years and were eager to see justice served. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Mark Armthorpe, a seasoned 50-year-old attorney known for his tough stance on violent crimes, argued that Cindy's actions were premeditated. He painted a picture of a woman consumed by jealousy and anger, unable to cope with her son's relationship with Coach Robert J. McMurdo. Armthorpe emphasized the brutality of the crime, noting that Cindy had not only killed her son but had also gone to great lengths to cover up the murder with the help of her husband, Ralph. The prosecution's case was bolstered by forensic evidence and Ralph's confession, both of which left little room for doubt. On the defense side, attorney Linda Caldwell Blankenship, a 45-year-old public defender with a reputation for taking on difficult cases, argued that Cindy's actions were not premeditated but rather the result of a momentary lapse in judgment fueled by alcohol and emotional distress. Caldwell Blankenship sought to portray Cindy as a victim of her circumstances, a woman struggling with addiction and mental health issues, overwhelmed by the pressures of her life. She pleaded for leniency, arguing that Cindy's actions were not those of a cold-blooded killer, but of a deeply troubled individual who needed help, not harsh punishment. Throughout the trial, Kyle's friends and teammates attended in support of the Ellerby family, their faces reflecting the pain and confusion of losing a beloved friend under such tragic circumstances. The jury deliberated for just 2 days before returning with a verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Cindy Ellerby was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought some measure of closure to Kyle's friends and family, but the impact of the trial was profound. Cindy's sentencing left the community divided. Some felt that justice had been served, while others believed the punishment was too harsh for a woman who had clearly been struggling with her own demons. For Ralph Ellerby, the trial marked the final unraveling of his family, leaving him to face the consequences of his own complicity in Kyle's death. In the aftermath of Cindy Ellerby's trial, life in Carbondale, Illinois would never be the same for those involved. Cindy, now serving a 25-year sentence at Logan Correctional Center, had little contact with the outside world. Her time in prison was marked by isolation and regret as she grappled with the consequences of her actions. The once vibrant woman who had been a familiar face at high school football games was now a shadow of her former self, lost in the routine of prison life. Ralph Ellerby, Kyle's father, was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. He sold the family home, unable to bear living in the place where his son had died. Ralph moved to a small apartment on the outskirts of town, where he continued to struggle with his guilt. He had lost not only his son and wife, but also the respect of the community. Ralph, who had once been a prominent figure in Carbondale, found himself alienated and alone, with only his memories for company. His battle with alcohol worsened, and he rarely left his apartment, becoming a recluse. Coach Robert J. McMurdo, who had been at the center of the scandal, resigned from his position at the high school. The revelation of his relationship with Kyle Ellerby had destroyed his career. Despite never being charged with a crime, the damage to his reputation was irreversible. McMurdo moved out of state, trying to rebuild his life in anonymity. However, the stigma followed him, and he found it difficult to escape the shadows of his past. He took on low-profile jobs, avoiding any roles that would put him back in the public eye. The community of Carbondale, once united in support of the Ellerby family, was left divided and disillusioned. The trial had exposed the darker side of the town, shattering the image of a perfect community. In the years that followed, the memory of Kyle Ellerby's tragic death lingered, a reminder of the secrets that can tear a family and a town apart.